Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore, the case of Roxana Vargas. Roxana Vargas was born on September 11, 1988. Venezuela. She grew up in a warm and loving family, with her older sister Mariana and parents Antonio and Ana Teresa. At 17, she graduated from the school at the dawn of the ball and received a scholarship from the Gran Mar Riscal Foundation to study social communications at the Catholic University of Santa Rosa in Caracas. So she and Mariana moved to the capital to live with their grandmother, who already lived there. Their parents frequently traveled to Caracas to visit them, cherishing the time spent together. By 2008, Roxana was in her 8th semester at the Faculty of Social Communications. She was also involved in the production of the well-known program Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. One of the last messages on her phone was sent on July 12, 2008. Said she was on her way to meet a friend at Plaza Venezuela at the time. She was in the Chacom area, but then she disappeared. Initially, detectives suspected that she might have been a victim of a robbery or kidnapping. This suspicion comes from the quick kidnappings, where criminals would abduct victims for a few hours to demand a ransom, releasing them afterward. Unfortunately, many of these incidents ended tragically, with some victims being killed if their families could not pay the ransom. Investigators have ruled out a kidnapping. As Roxana's family has not received a ransom demand, they then considered the possibility of a robbery, but there was no evidence to support this theory either. On July 14, 2008, the body of a girl was discovered by a security guard working at the Biosa Airline building, now known as Conviasa. Located in the Kaiser Park area of Caracas, the guard heard loud barking from dogs near a vacant lot close to his workplace and decided to investigate. Upon approaching the lot, he found the lifeless body of a girl lying amidst a pile of construction debris. Shocked by the discovery, he immediately contacted a criminal investigation agency. Detectives arrived at the scene and determined that the body was buried under rubble, stones, wooden boards, and other waste. Forensic experts conducted an initial examination and concluded that the girl had been dead for approximately 36 to 48 hours. Her face was disfigured, and one of her eyes was dislodged from its socket. The body showed multiple injuries and bruises, but the primary cause of death was determined to be a skull fracture, caused by several blows to the head with a blunt object. The girl was wearing a triangular earring in her left ear, but the matching earring from her right ear was missing. The police quickly identified the victim. On July 13, the day before the body was found, a woman named Anna had reported the disappearance of her 19-year-old daughter, Roxana. Roxana's physical description matched the body, and DNA testing later confirmed her identity. In a conversation with Roxana's mother, Anna, she admitted that she suspected one person. The person she referred to was psychiatrist Edmundo Chirinos. At the time, Edmundo was 73 years old and was a well-known psychiatrist. Highly educated, he earned his surgical diploma in 1958 and graduated as a psychologist in 1960 from the Central University of Venezuela. Additionally, he obtained master's degrees in neuroscience and clinical psychology from prestigious institutions, including Oxford and Cambridge in England, the University of Marseille in France, and Quincy University in New York. By 1961, Edmundo founded the School of Psychology at the Central University of Venezuela, and in 1984, he was elected as the university's rector. He has a varied professional background, and he is also actively involved in politics. In 1988, he ran for president as a candidate of the Independent Moral Movement. By 1999, He was a member of the National Constituent Assembly. Due to his impressive academic qualifications, he served as a personal therapist for Presidents Jaime Lucinchi, Rafael Caldera, and Hugo Chavez. He also established a psychiatric clinic called Clin Uesi in La Florida, Caracas. Ana shared with detectives the reasons she suspected Edmundo of killing her daughter. She revealed that Roxana used to date him. She also mentioned that Roxana had been a patient of his, seeking help for postpartum depression after Roxana was diagnosed with depression on October 2, 2007. The family decided to consult a trusted doctor, Edmundo. At that time, Roxana was already struggling with eating disorders. Roxana had long been concerned about her weight, and these thoughts became increasingly distressing for her. Ana said that during her first consultation with Dr. Edmundo, Roxana was diagnosed with schizophrenia, a decision her family felt was made too quickly. Nevertheless, they decided to follow Edmundo's advice when he suggested that Roxana try a method that would increase her sleep time. He believed that this method could solve her problem. The sleep therapy he proposed involved taking small doses of sedatives and sleeping pills over a period of time. When Roxana met Edmundo again for further consultation, he began asking her strange questions, including whether she had a boyfriend. She replied that she did, but this was not true. She had feelings for a young man named Mariana, who did not return her affection. Mariana was also her sister's classmate, and at that time, she only had a friendly relationship with him. Edmundo then inquired if she had been intimate with her boyfriend, to which she truthfully answered no, as she was still a virgin. During their first meeting, Edmundo attempted to get physically closer to Roxana, which felt inappropriate to others, however. She began to notice that his desire for physical closeness with her was becoming more apparent. After one of Roxana's consultations, she asked her mother to take her to the pharmacy to buy sanitary pads because she had unexpectedly started her period. Roxana's mother, Ana, was aware of her daughter's menstrual cycle and knew that this period was not due yet, although this was unusual. Ana remained calm. One day, while Roxana was in another sleep therapy session with Edmundo, Ana waited in the waiting room and met another mother named Luisa, who was also there for her daughter's sleep therapy. They exchanged phone numbers, and during their conversation, Luisa revealed that her daughter had also started her period right after a session. Both speculated that these occurrences might be side effects of the sedatives and psychotropic medications their daughters were taking. On October 15, 2007, Roxana had her last consultation with Dr. Edmundo near the end of the session. She woke up when the sleeping pills she had taken stopped being effective. The first thing she noticed was a bright light shining in her eyes. Then, she felt Edmundo touch her lips and kiss her. In a matter of moments, he removed her underwear and began to assault her. She was in shock and tried to escape. But he quickly stopped her, hugged her, and said that sedatives can sometimes cause hallucinations. When she left the clinic, Roxana went to meet her mother, Ana, and together, they walked to the shopping mall. There, they met her best friend Valentina, seizing the opportunity when her mother was not listening. She told Valentina about what had happened in the clinic. Valentina was so disturbed by Roxana's story that when Roxana went to the restroom, she spoke to Ana about her concerns. When Roxana returned, Ana immediately confronted her, asking what had occurred at Edmundo's office. She recounted the events, though her memory was hazy due to the sedative. After hearing the details, Ana took Roxana to a gynecologist, and the doctor confirmed what Roxana had said. She had always been honest with her mother, so Ana believed that her daughter was not at fault. Roxana's horrifying revelation, coupled with a medical examination, shows that Edmundo took advantage of her. Ana considered suing Edmundo for violence against her daughter, Roxana, but later she felt worried about this decision. She doubted anyone would believe her, because Edmundo was a famous and prestigious doctor with many connections in the political world. She worries about the consequences both she and her daughter will face if she files a complaint. After leaving the gynecology clinic, Anna takes Roxana back to Bay del Pasco for a psychological consultation with Dr. Abel. As they are concerned about her mental health, the girl was experiencing insomnia and nervous breakdowns, and she frequently expressed a desire to see Dr. Edmundo, Abel diagnosed with bipolar affective disorder and eating problems, which made her feel anxious and stressed. She underwent treatment with Abel until mid-December 2007, during which she showed significant improvement. As a result, Abel recommended that she return to Caracas to continue her studies. He also advised avoiding any meetings with Edmundo. Anna found a female psychiatrist, Audrey Rusin, at the Scarakis Treatment Center in Caracas now. Roxana could continue regular psychiatric consultations to maintain her mental health, which was a relief for Anna, however. As soon as Roxana returned to Caracas, she started an intimate relationship with Edmundo. This time, their interactions were not about consultations or treatment sessions. In her blog, she described their first encounter and mentioned that their relationship was without commitments. As Edmundo was much older than her, she also shared her feelings for him. However, she felt worried because in his eyes, she was just an object to satisfy his sexual desires. She became more and more emotionally dependent on him over time. Her family and friends realized that this relationship was still going on, and they tried everything to convince her to change her mind. They wanted to force her to break up, but she refused. Roxana trusted her mother and sister completely because they knew her very well. They noticed a sudden change in her mood. Initially, she hoped that Edmundo would develop feelings for her, but as time went on, her hopes faded. By May 2008, she was fed up because she no longer wanted to be the object for him to satisfy his sexual desires. She threatened him that if he did not change, she would make their relationship public. She also planned to gather evidence of his mistreatment of other patients. She warned him that if the incident was exposed, his career would be over, as no one would want to see him for medical treatment anymore. Edmundo understood Roxana better than ever. He was aware that she had once participated in a popular television program, giving her a platform to share her story with the media. Additionally, the TV channel that aired the program was owned by someone who had previously clashed with he, making the fallout even more serious. It became clear to he that if she went public, it could lead to a nationwide scandal. On July 12, 2008, around 2 p.m., Roxana met with Mariana, a young man she had previously loved. In the Chacao area, he was supposed to help her write a script. The meeting took place at a shopping mall around 6 p.m. However, the meeting was interrupted when Edmundo kept calling to harass Roxana. She felt forced to cancel her date with Mariana, saying she needed to see her best friend. Irma, however, Mariana, who knew Roxana well, quickly realized she was actually going to see Edmundo. In fact, Mariana, Roxana and her sister were all close friends and knew about her relationship with Edmundo. He had told her many times that he did not approve of the relationship, but his words had no effect. She often had to come up with excuses to hide from her friends and family whenever she went on a date with Edmundo because she did not want to be criticized. Ultimately, Mariana had no choice but to put her in a taxi, knowing she was indeed heading to meet Edmundo. Earlier that evening, she had planned to meet Irma, but she eventually texts Irma to say she's going to meet someone Irma also knows. Referring to Edmundo, Irma understood immediately. When Irma called, she around 7:40 p.m., but only received a brief answer. After that call, no one heard from Roxana again. When the police began investigating the case, Edmundo tried to defend himself and gave interviews about Roxana's disappearance. During the interview, he confirmed that she had come to the clinic that day, but had only stayed for a few minutes. On July 21, 2008, Edmundo was called to the prosecutor's office to testify as a witness, but failed to appear. Consequently, the detectives assigned to the case searched his belongings, starting with his office at the La Florida clinic. There, they discovered a triangular earring, which matched the one found on Roxana's body. They also found blood stains in the office and collected samples for DNA analysis using luminol. Forensic experts found large blood stains on the sofa, which appeared to have been meticulously cleaned. Along with hair, DNA testing confirmed that both the blood and hair belonged to Roxana. At that time, Edmundo lived in a penthouse in the Cebucan neighborhood of Caracas. However, it wasn't long before the police arrived at his residence. What they discovered among his personal belongings shocked them. They found 1.2 photographs of women, some naked, others in their underwear. Most of these photos were taken at his clinic, and the women appear to be under the influence of psychotropic drugs. Among the photographs were also images of Roxana. This evidence implicated Edmundo in Roxana's death. Despite this, he denied all accusations from the start. On August 1, 2008, Edmundo was arrested and charged with the attempted murder of Roxana. During the initial hearing, the court ordered that he remain under house arrest while the investigation continued. He was also prohibited from leaving the country, and his medical license was suspended. However, despite these bans, he continued to quietly provide psychological counseling services at home for 2 years. Until the trial began, it was not until the trial that he was permanently stripped of his medical license. Edmundo's trial officially began on March 16, 2010. The prosecution presented its case based on evidence gathered during the investigation. According to them, on July 12, 2008, Edmundo asked Roxana to come to his office. Shortly after 7:00 p.m., she went to his clinic in La Florida, where he struck her repeatedly in the head with a blunt object. An autopsy revealed that she had suffered at least 7 skull fractures. Additionally, the amount of drugs in her system far exceeded the recommended therapeutic dose. It was also discovered that she had been taking antidepressants during the trial. The prosecution has established that Roxana, due to her psychological condition, was emotionally unstable and easily manipulated. Edmundo, being medically trained, was fully aware of this and exploited his expertise to manipulate and intimidate her. 15 women testified during the trial, all alleging that Edmundo had subjected them to abuse during sleep therapy sessions. The court verified their claims. Edmundo's defense team argued that Roxana's visit to his office that day was very brief, suggesting he had no involvement in her murder. They attempted to shift the blame to someone else, asserting that he had no connection to the crime. However, despite these efforts to distort the facts, the evidence presented to the court was overwhelming. In September 2010, the court sentenced Edmundo Chirinos to 20 years in prison to be served in the state of Miranda. At that time, the maximum sentence for similar cases was 30 years. While in prison, Edmundo underwent surgery in the intensive care unit. Afterward, it was claimed that he could neither speak nor walk and began using a wheelchair less than 2 years later. In March 2012, he was released from prison to serve the rest of his sentence at home. This news spread across various media outlets, and what drew attention was that, upon his release, he was speaking perfectly normally. This sparked public outrage. As many saw it as an injustice, it appeared that arrangements had been made to allow him to return home. It became evident that the surgery had not resulted in the severe complications that were initially reported, leading to speculation about the true reasons for his release. On August 24, 2013, Edmundo passed away at his home from natural causes. The story of Roxana and Edmundo remains etched in the minds of many Venezuelans and is considered one of the most shocking cases in the country's history. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Tracy Hallett and J.B. Beasley. J.B. Beasley, born on July 31, 1981, in Troy, Alabama, to parents Cheryl and Hilton Lanier Beasley. After her parents' separation, Beasley moved to Dothan with her mother in 1984. She was deeply loved by her mother and stepfather, Joey Begun, whom her mother married a few years later. Beasley grew up in a comfortable home in Dothan, Alabama, with her 4 sisters. She developed into a sociable young woman with a wide range of interests, including cheerleading, dance, piano, and swimming. She also worked as a model, along with her sisters, for several agencies. Despite her many pursuits, she valued time spent with friends and family. In high school, Beasley befriended Tracy Hallett, a fellow cheerleader. They quickly became inseparable. Tracy Hallett was born on March 3, 1982, to Carolyn and Robert Hallett. Her father, a member of the Dothan Police Department, tragically passed away when Tracy was just 5 years old. Her mother, Carolyn, later remarried a man named Mike Roberts, who helped raise Tracy Hallett alongside her mother. Tracy Hallett was a shy but selfless person who always put others before herself. She was particularly protective of her 2 younger brothers and took her responsibilities as an older sister seriously. Like Beasley, Tracy Hallett attended Northview High School, earning good grades and participating as a cheerleader. As Beasley and Tracy Hallett were transitioning into adulthood, they were unaware of the tragic events that would soon shatter their hopes and dreams. On the evening of July 31, 1999, around 10:05 p.m., they friends left Dothan in J.B. Beasley's black 1993 Mazda 929, heading to a birthday party in Headland, just a few miles north. However, their unfamiliarity with the roads soon led them into difficulty. Beasley and Tracy Hallett started their trip but took a wrong turn shortly after leaving their hometown, becoming lost. At around 10:30 p.m., they stopped at a BP gas station in Headland, near the intersection of routes 173 and 431, to get directions. From the gas station's payphone, they called their friends to get clearer directions to their party destination. However, after continuing their trip, they found themselves in Ozark, Alabama, approximately 24 miles northwest of Headland, rather than their desired location. At 11:30 p.m., they realized they were still lost and pulled over at the Big Little store to get their bearings. Although the store was closed, Tracy Hallett used the payphone to call her mother, explaining that they had gotten lost and were now in Ozark. She updated her mother on their plans to return home rather than continue their search for the party. A woman named Marilyn Merrick and her daughters pulled into a gas station to buy a soda. Tracy Hallett and Beasley approached them, asking for directions to Dothan. Marilyn did her best to explain the route, and they seemed to grasp it. She noticed that they appeared to be well-mannered and were driving a clean and tidy car. As Marilyn watched, they followed her directions, pulling out of the parking lot and turning right. On August 1, 1999, Tracy Hallett's mother filed a missing person report with the police around 8 a.m. Investigators quickly began searching for Tracy Hallett and her friend, Beasley, who had not been seen since the previous night. Their first lead came when police discovered Beasley's car parked on Herring Avenue in Ozark. The vehicle showed signs of recent use, with an almost empty gas tank despite being filled the day before. The car was also dirty and had a partially rolled down driver's side window, yet the doors were locked with no signs of forced entry. Inside, police found Beasley's driver's license on the dashboard, along with 8 purses and cash, which suggested that the disappearance was not a result of a typical theft or robbery. The investigation into She's initially focused on finding Beasley's car keys, as they were the only reported missing item. However, there was no sign of either Tracy Hallett or Beasley. A suspicious palm print on the locked trunk of Beasley's car heightened the police's concerns that something was terribly wrong. Although they suspected the trunk might hold important clues, they couldn't access it without the keys. It took 6 hours for the police to realize that the trunk could be opened from the inside using a latch, eliminating the need for the car key or a locksmith. Upon opening the trunk, the officers made a disturbing discovery. The lifeless bodies of the girls were found inside. Both victims were fully dressed, but their pants were soiled below the waist. Each girl had a single gunshot wound to the head, with Tracy Howlett shot in the temple and Beasley in the right cheek. Tracy Howlett had suffered injuries consistent with a violent struggle, including a 9mm shell casing lodged on her leg, scratches on her arm, and thornbriars tangled in her jeans. Despite the gruesome nature of the crime, investigators believed that they were likely killed while inside the trunk of the car and that their deaths were not the result of a random attack, but rather an intentional act. As the families of the victims were notified of the tragic discovery, the authorities formally launched a homicide investigation. Initially, detectives considered robbery as a possible motive, but this theory was quickly dismissed when they found that the victims' personal belongings, including purses, jewelry, money, and credit cards, were still inside the car. Autopsies revealed that they had no alcohol or drugs in their system, and there was no evidence of sexual assault. This led investigators to rule out the possibility that the crime was motivated by sex. However, a subsequent report from the State Crime Lab, issued more than 2 months later, found traces of unknown semen on Tracy Howlett's clothing and skin. The palm print found on the trunk lid remained unidentified, with no matches in the database and no suspect to compare it to. As a result, authorities had limited leads to pursue. Despite the widespread attention the double murder of the teenagers received, investigators were no closer to identifying a suspect. A month after the discovery of Beasley and Tracy Howlett's bodies, a surprising breakthrough occurred. Johnny William Barentine, a 28-year-old Ozark resident, visited the Ozark Police Department on September 1st and shared a remarkable account. He claimed to have witnessed the double murder, stating that he had seen the incident on the same night as the crimes, around the time Tracy Howlett made a call from the Big Little Store's payphone. According to Barentine, he had been out buying milk for his 2-year-old son when he stumbled upon the horrific event. He returned home at 1 a.m., visibly upset, and told his wife that he had been in a collision with a black truck near Herring Road. After sharing this incident with friends in the days that followed Tracy Howlett and Beasley's murder, they encouraged him to report it to the police. They suggested that this information might be connected to the murders and could help the police solve the case, ultimately leading to the reward. During a 4-hour interview with Ozark police, Barentine's account of the events surrounding the killings changed 6 times. Initially, he told police that on the night of the murders, he saw a black truck speeding away from the area where the bodies were found. However, as the interview progressed, his story continued to evolve and change. Eventually, Barentine claimed that he had given a ride to a tattooed man he didn't know, and they drove past the Big Little Store together. He then testified that the man got into the car with 2 girls, whom he identified as Tracy Howlett and Beasley. According to Barentine, the man forced they out of the car on Herring Avenue. A confrontation took place between the man and they as they tried to escape. After putting they in the trunk, Barentine reported seeing something in the man's hands just before hearing 2 gunshots. The man then returned to the car, and Barentine drove him away from the scene before heading home. In a different account, Barentine confessed to investigators that he knew the man he had given a ride to and identified him as his neighbor. Notably, Barentine lived less than a mile from where the police found the victims' bodies. Johnny Barentine was named the prime suspect in the murders of Beasley and Tracy Howlett, but his story raised several red flags. He failed to mention any sexual activity that would explain the semen found on Beasley's clothing and body. Additionally, the neighbor he implicated had a solid alibi for the time of the crime. Barentine's appearance in his mugshot also seemed suspicious, as he looked startled and disheveled, as if he had just been awoken from a deep sleep. Despite these inconsistencies, police initially believed they had the right person. However, Barentine soon confessed that he had fabricated his entire story to collect the reward money. Surprisingly, at the preliminary hearing on September 21st, Alabama Bureau of Investigation agent Charles Huggins testified that Barentine was able to accurately describe her clothing and other details consistent with the crime scene, which suggested that he may have had some knowledge of the events. After his arrest, Barentine was held in the Dale County Jail in Ozark without the possibility of bail. At a bond hearing on October 18th, Barentine claimed he was not involved in the killings. He told the judge that he had not picked up a tattooed man and had not witnessed anything on the night of the murders. According to Barentine, he had gone to the BP station around 11 p.m. to buy milk for his child and later fabricated a story to collect the reward money. The judge denied Barentine's request for bond, and he returned to jail. Despite the challenges, Barentine's family continued to support him. They gave interviews to the media, stating that he was innocent and incapable of harming anyone. Barentine's lawyer, Bill Kimmons, also maintained his client's innocence, stating that the prolonged interrogation had taken a toll on him, causing him to become entangled in his own web of deceit. During police questioning, Barentine was not informed that he was free to leave or use the bathroom at any time. His defense team highlighted that he had limited education, having only completed the 7th grade and part of the 8th grade, and was in special education classes, which suggested he lacked the capacity to plan a complex crime. He was eventually released from jail on December 17, 1999, when DNA evidence revealed that his DNA did not match the semen found on the victim's body and clothing. In January 2000, a grand jury in Dale County declined to indict Barentine, effectively clearing him as a suspect in the double murder. The investigation suffered a setback after Barentine's clearance, and the methods used by investigators were criticized. Questions arose about the Ozark Police Department's ability to handle the case. Despite this, the police still had several potential suspects under consideration. A Michigan man was considered a key suspect due to his proximity to the scene and suspicious behavior. He was in the area on the night of the murders and attended a party near where Beasley's car was found. Within days, he left town, raising suspicions. Investigators made 3 trips to Michigan to interview him, but he was unable to provide a solid alibi for hours on the night of the murder. Police were initially interested in 2 key leads, a person of interest whose DNA didn't match the crime scene, and a driver of a small white pickup truck captured on surveillance footage. The video showed the truck at the gas pumps at the same time the victims, Beasley and Tracy Hallett, were nearby at the payphone. However, no record of a gas purchase existed, and the video was of poor quality, making it impossible to clearly identify the driver or determine if anyone got out of the truck. The police released a photo of the truck a month later, asking for the public's help in identifying the driver. Unfortunately, no one came forward with any information, and the lead eventually disappeared. The investigation's last lead was a man from Mississippi who had been arrested in Jones County on an outstanding warrant for possessing drug paraphernalia. He had been visiting relatives in Ozark, but departed 2 days after the murders. Investigators wanted to question him, but ultimately, he provided no significant information. Due to lack of evidence, they were forced to release him. In March 2000, a woman came forward, claiming she heard screams and 2 gunshots near Highway 123 South, just inside the city limits, on the night of the murders. She admitted she had been scared to report it earlier. Police searched the area based on her description and found a 9mm bullet, the same type used to kill they. However, the bullet's brand did not match the brand of the bullet shell casing found on Tracy's body. The unspent bullet found no useful markings for forensic comparison to other evidence, ruling out another potential lead in the case. Despite this and other dead ends over the years, investigators remained hopeful for a DNA match. As the families of Beasley and Tracy Howlett tried to move on with their lives, the case eventually went cold. Years later, new information rekindled the investigation. In 2015, a bombshell accusation shook the case. Rena, an auxiliary police officer with the Ozark Police Department, came forward and publicly accused a fellow officer of murdering Beasley and Tracy Howlett and implicated others in a cover-up. Rena made several disturbing allegations regarding the Ozark Police Department. She claimed that on July 31, 1999, a police officer stopped Beasley and demanded to know the location of cassette tapes containing incriminating conversations about the police department's involvement in cocaine trafficking. According to Rena, this confrontation led to the tragic murder of two innocent teenagers. Rena further alleged that she was threatened by multiple law enforcement officials who knew the identity of the murderer but helped cover up the crime by destroying evidence. Specifically, Rena accused three officers, Gary Butch Whittington, Rex Tipton, and Eddie Henderson, of harassing and intimidating her. She also implicated the former police chief, Tony Spivey, who led the original investigation, in the cover-up. However, Rena declined to reveal the name of the officer she believed was directly responsible for the murders. American journalist John B. Carroll wrote that the officer likely assumed they girls planned to use the tapes as evidence in a court case set for August 2, 1999, just over a day after their murders. Carroll also reported that Rena was brutally beaten with a baseball bat after coming forward, which prevented her from revealing the actual killer. Law enforcement officials accused by Rena denied any involvement in the murders of Beasley and Tracy Howlett. Due to a lack of physical evidence, none of the officials were ever formally named as suspects in the case. Despite this, online allegations against them spread quickly on true crime websites and social media. As a result, Keith Coffin, Rex Tipton, Tony Spivey, Eddie Henderson, and Gary Butch Whittington from the Ozark, Alabama Police Department sued Rena Crum, John B. Carroll for defamation in 2016. The case was later dismissed in 2018. In May 2016, Rena Crum was convicted of harassing Beasley's sister over several years and received a suspended sentence and a $250 fine. Despite an extensive investigation that spanned 2 decades, including numerous interviews and DNA samples, authorities were unable to identify a suspect. It wasn't until 2019 that advances in DNA technology finally led to a breakthrough. In March 2019, investigators sent the DNA evidence found on Beasley's body in clothes to a specialized lab in Virginia called Parabon Nano. The lab used public genealogy databases to analyze the DNA and found a match, leading them to identify a suspect named Coley McCraney. McCraney, 45, was not previously a suspect in the 1999 murders of Beasley and Tracy Howlett, but DNA evidence now implicated him in the crime. McCraney was born in Alabama and graduated from Carroll High School in Ozark in 1992. During his time in high school, he was an athlete and also served as the president of the library club. After graduation, he enlisted in the U.S. Air Force and served from 1993 to 1997. In 1992, McCraney was married, but they separated 2 years later. They eventually divorced. His ex-wife filed a complaint with the Air Force in 1994, alleging that McCraney had assaulted her. McCraney later remarried in 2001 and had children with his second wife. In 1998, he was found to have failed to pay child support, but otherwise, he had no significant criminal record over the past 20 years. McCraney worked as a truck driver throughout his career, employed by several Alabama-based trucking companies over the years. More recently, he co-founded a church and worked as a bishop. At the time of the 1999 murders, Coley McCraney was 26 years old and living in Ozark, just 1 mile from where the bodies of Beasley and Tracy Howlett were found. Nearly 20 years later, on March 15, 2019, McCraney was arrested in Daleville, Alabama, following a traffic stop. During his subsequent interview with police, McCraney claimed to not know the victims. However, the investigators did not reveal any motive for the murders. The news of McCraney's arrest sent shockwaves through the Ozark community, including its police chief, Marlon Walker, who had attended school with McCraney. As the case seemed to be finally unraveling, a new development emerged. Rena Crum, a 53-year-old woman who had previously accused the Ozark Police Department of covering up the murder, withdrew her allegations during an August 2022 hearing. McCraney, 49, is currently in Dale County Jail awaiting trial on 5 counts of capital murder for the shooting deaths of Beasley and Tracy Hallett. His bond was denied, and his trial is scheduled for April 17, 2023. The families of the victims expressed relief that the alleged killer has been apprehended, but they still face the difficult process of reliving painful memories during the trial. McCraney was ultimately found guilty of the murder and rape of Beasley and the murder of Hallett. He was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Scott Ponder. Scott Dean Ponder was born on February 7, 1973, to a loving family. His mother, Beverly Guy, and stepfather, Terry Guy, encouraged his passion for cars and motorcycles from a young age. They supported his development as a rider and even helped him obtain a racing license as soon as he was eligible. Scott's talent and dedication earned him recognition, including numerous admirers and local hero status in Chesnee. Scott was a sociable person who enjoyed spending time with many people, and they enjoyed his company as well. In the late 1990s, Scott started repairing bikes in his grandmother's backyard, which eventually led to the establishment of Superbike Motorsports. The business expanded to a one-garage building in 2001, and Scott brought in his best friend, Brian Lucas, as a partner. They partnered to obtain a Suzuki dealership, resulting in swift expansion and achievement. Brian, who initially worked part-time when the business first started, left his job to become the store's full-time manager. Through their dedication and expertise, the duo attracted numerous customers, and the business began to flourish. Despite being salesmen, they prioritized educating their customers about bikes and racing. Scott's mother, Beverly Guy, who initially visited the store occasionally, began to visit regularly and eventually took on responsibilities such as accounting, payroll, and cash management. With the trio's combined efforts, the business thrived, selling 100,000 motorbikes every month. Scott attended an industry convention in Chicago, where he met his future wife, Melissa Brackman, a former homecoming queen from Stafford High School. They instantly connected and enjoyed each other's company, leading to frequent meetups as their relationship deepened. Eventually, they decided to get married, and their love life, both before and after the wedding, resembled a fairy tale, with their love growing stronger each day. I met Scott at a motorcycle show in Indianapolis, where he struck me as a kind and charming Southern gentleman. My feelings for him developed rapidly, and I soon realized I was in love with him. Scott and I decided to start a family, but we struggled to conceive. We sought medical help, and after months of trying, I finally became pregnant with a baby boy. In October 2003, I discovered I was pregnant while visiting my hometown. I took a pregnancy test at my brother's house without telling anyone, and I was overjoyed when the test was positive. Scott was thrilled when I shared the news with him. Around the same time, Scott's business was booming, with millions of dollars in sales in the first year. To keep up with the demand, he expanded his store and hired a new mechanic, Chris Sherbert. Chris was well known in town for his exceptional wrench skills, which caught Scott's attention. Scott, Beverly, Brian, and Chris formed a talented team that gained recognition beyond their small town of Chesnee. Scott Ponder's life was going smoothly until disaster struck. November 6, 2003, was a sunny day, but the atmosphere at Superbike Motorsports was vastly different. You might remember where you were on that day. I recall it clearly. I had spoken to Scott around 2:15 p.m., and our conversation was brief and normal. He said goodbye, and that was the last time we spoke. Scott and the others began their day at the shop as usual. The store had a few customers browsing, including Kelly Sisk and his 4-year-old son. Kelly was there to purchase a go-kart for his family, and after completing the transaction, he lingered in the shop for a bit. Brian was supposed to be on holiday with his family, but Scott called him in to address a customer complaint about a neglected bike. Brian arrived at the shop and immediately started working on the bike. Meanwhile, Scott was helping another customer when his mother, Beverly, stopped by. She had just taken Scott's cancer-stricken grandmother to chemotherapy and was planning to deposit money into Scott's account at the bank later that day, around 2:30 p.m. Beverly lent a hand to Scott at the counter, assisting him with his tasks. Scott's friend Noel called the Superbike Motorsports shop, also known as the shop. Beverly answered the phone and agreed to let Noel stop by, which he said would take only 7 minutes. After hanging up, Beverly went to use the bathroom. Within those 7 minutes, a tragic event unfolded. Scott, Brian, Beverly, and Chris, the 4 people present at the shop, were brutally shot and killed. The shooting occurred at 3 p.m. inside the Superbike Motorsports premises. When Scott's friend Noel arrived, he found Scott and Brian lying motionless at the front of the shop. Initially, Noel thought they were playing a prank and even kicked them, telling them to stop joking around. However, upon seeing the pool of blood beneath their bodies, he quickly realized the gravity of the situation and called 911. Noel reported the incident to the emergency operator, stating that everyone at the shop had been shot and was lying in a pool of blood, including his mom, the mechanic, and the owner. The police and paramedics rushed to the scene, as this was the first quadruple murder in the small town of Chesney. The news spread rapidly, drawing not only the victims' families but also a crowd of onlookers to the crime scene. The police launched an immediate investigation and began collecting evidence at the crime scene. They discovered Chris's body at the back of the shop, positioned as if he had been working on a bike just before being killed. Beverly's body was found inside the shop, near the bathroom, suggesting she was ambushed as she exited. The bodies of Brian and Scott were located at the front of the store, with Brian's closer to the door and Scott's closer to a parked car. It appeared that both men had attempted to flee after hearing gunshots and encountering the shooter, but were unsuccessful. A thorough search of the crime scene by the police and forensic team yielded blood samples and other evidence. The killings were determined to be an execution-style homicide, with the shooter intentionally targeting the victims and shooting them at close range in the chest and head. Melissa, Scott's wife, received a call about the shooting and rushed to the scene. Detectives launched a thorough investigation and quickly found their first lead. Several passers-by reported seeing a couple lingering near the shop around the time of the murder. The detectives created sketches of the suspects based on the eyewitnesses' descriptions and distributed the pictures throughout South Carolina. The detectives initially suspected that the man and they was the shooter, and that he had attacked Chris and Beverly from behind while she distracted Scott and Brian at the front of the shop. However, this was only a theory, and no concrete evidence supported it. Despite months of searching, the police were unable to find any new leads. As media coverage intensified, detectives re-examined the case from a different angle, which ultimately led to a breakthrough. The detectives began to scrutinize the victims' pasts and lifestyles. While Scott, Beverly, and Brian appeared to be clean, Chris, the mechanic, had a more complex background. During the investigation, detectives discovered that Chris had previously worked for a company with ties to the drug trade. It was also revealed that Chris may have been involved in smuggling and was set to appear in court the following Monday, prior to the murders. In 2003, the police were actively working to combat a growing drug problem, particularly among young people. With Chris's connection to the drug trade now apparent, detectives and the public began to question whether the motive behind the quadruple homicide was to kill Chris specifically, with the other victims being unintentional casualties. It was also speculated that Chris's scheduled court appearance may have been a motive for his murder, as those involved in the drug business may have believed he would testify against them. Although this theory seemed plausible, particularly given that Chris was the first to be shot, there was no concrete evidence to support it. As a result, the investigation once again stalled. The case remained unsolved for an entire year, until the detectives decided to approach it from a fresh perspective. The detectives discovered that Brian, a friend and co-worker of Scott's, had been searching for a new house weeks before the murder. However, his wife Robin claimed to have had no knowledge of this decision. This revelation raised suspicions about the state of their marriage. Brian's mother, Lorraine Lucas, later revealed that their marriage was unhappy and strained, and that Brian had been planning to leave Robin to live alone. Lorraine recalled a tense encounter between Brian and Robin, during which Robin made faces behind Brian's back, leading to a confrontation when Brian asked her to treat his mother with respect. While this incident may not have seemed directly related to the shooting at first, it would later become a crucial piece of the puzzle. The quadruple murder was a catastrophic event that left the families of the 4 victims deeply traumatized and devastated. Melissa, in particular, struggled to cope with the loss of her beloved husband. Her life was once flawless, but a devastating event changed everything, leaving her to put the shattered remains back together. Despite her grief, Melissa found the strength to carry on for the sake of her newborn son, Scott Ponder Jr., who was born in June 2004. The police continued to call on Melissa for questioning, but she remained strong for her child's sake. In a surprising turn of events, the police obtained a DNA sample from Scott Ponder Jr.'s diaper, which was collected after Melissa had changed him at the station. The results of the DNA test shocked everyone, revealing that Ponder Jr.'s DNA matched Brian's, not Scott's. This discovery sparked tension between Melissa and her father-in-law, William Ponder, who repeatedly questioned her about the truth. Melissa was told that the detectives believed they had evidence linking her to the crime, and she was given a clear warning: if the proof implicated her, they would come for her wherever she was. As the investigation continued, the detectives began to focus on a possible love triangle between Scott, Melissa, and Brian. Rumors about Melissa's infidelity soon spread throughout the neighborhood, further complicating the case. Brian's mother considered the possibility of him having an affair due to his unhappiness in marriage and the thought of divorce. However, Melissa consistently denied any involvement with Brian and affirmed Scott Ponder's child's paternity, stating that she and Scott Ponder had struggled to conceive. Melissa was certain that the child belonged to her and Scott, and she remained convinced even after being questioned multiple times. For a year and a half, detectives monitored Melissa's every move, searching for a lead. Then, after 18 months, they revealed a startling discovery: the blood sample collected from the crime scene contained an error. A DNA test showed a match between Brian and Beverly's DNA, which should not be the case since Scott was Beverly's son, not Brian. Realizing their mistake, detectives understood that the blood samples from Scott and Brian had been mislabeled due to their close proximity at the crime scene. The discovery cleared Melissa's name regarding the love triangle theory, and detectives began to investigate a connection between the Superbike Motorsports homicide and another murder that occurred just 30 meters away, 5 months earlier. On May 16, 2003, a triple homicide shook the town of Greer, South Carolina. The incident took place at the Blue Ridge Savings Bank, where Sylvia Holtzclaw was due to start her shift. However, a local couple, Dee and Maggie Barnes, visited the bank at around 1:30 p.m. A 911 call was made to the Greer Police Department, reporting a shooting at the bank. Unfortunately, Sylvia, Dee, and Maggie were found shot to death. The Greer Police Department received a distress call from the Blue Ridge Savings Bank. One of the responding officers described the scene, noting that they were among the first to arrive. Like the Superbike Motorsports incident, the shooting occurred in broad daylight with no witnesses present. After reviewing the CCTV footage, police observed a red car driving towards the bank at 1:24 p.m. and leaving 3 minutes after the incident. A red car was spotted driving to a bank on Frontage Road at 1:24 p.m. 3 minutes later, the Barnes family was seen driving in the same area. Coincidentally, a similar red car was seen at the scene of a quadruple homicide at Superbike Motorsports. Detectives began searching for the red car and discovered it had been stolen from a rental lot by 39-year-old Emerson Wright days before the homicide. Police believed Emerson had entered the bank to rob it, but panicked and shot a couple who tried to intervene. However, detectives were unable to question Emerson about the bank and Superbike Motorsports murders due to a series of events that unfolded 2 years later. Emerson was wanted for a string of burglaries in the Atlanta area when he was chased by a state trooper. He crashed his car, got out, and shot himself in the head with a single gunshot wound. Although detectives noted similarities between their cases, they did not believe they were connected. The quadruple homicide at Superbike Motorsports in 2003 went cold just months later, leaving the victims' families, including Melissa, without any answers for 13 long years. Despite the lack of progress, Melissa and the other families of the victims refused to give up, tirelessly searching for any lead that might uncover the truth behind the gruesome crime. Unfortunately, their efforts yielded nothing. However, in 2016, the case was reopened after detectives made a breakthrough. This development brought new hope to the families, 13 years after the crime had taken place. The man behind the quadruple murder finally emerged when he was arrested for an unrelated crime. During his interrogation, he confessed to the Superbike Motorsports murders. The killer was 45 years old Todd Kohlhepp, born on March 7, 1971, to parents Reggie and William. After his parents' divorce when he was just 2 years old, Todd began living with his mother and her new partner, but he often sought to spend more time with his biological father. Todd's behavior was extremely aggressive and volatile, particularly when he was young. He struggled with controlling his anger, which often led to violent outbursts. During his time in nursery school, he killed a goldfish with bleach and shot a dog with a BB gun. Despite spending 3.5 months in a psychiatric hospital in Georgia, his behavior showed no signs of improvement. As a last resort, his mother, Ray G., sent him to live with his father, William, in the hopes that a change of environment would help him manage his behavior. However, this change had little effect. At the age of 15, Todd planned and executed the kidnapping of 14-year-old Christy Granado in Tempe, Arizona, on November 25, 1986. Todd knocked on Christy's door, threatened her with a .22 caliber revolver, and forced her to follow him to his home. Once there, he tied her up, taped her mouth shut, and assaulted her. After the assault, he walked her home and threatened to kill her entire family if she told anyone about the incident. However, Christy confided in her parents, who immediately called 911. As a result, Todd was charged with kidnapping, sexual assault, and committing a dangerous crime against children. In 1987, he pleaded guilty to the kidnapping charge, and the other charges were dropped. Todd was sentenced to 15 years in prison and was required to register as a sex offender. When Todd was released, he was a reformed person and he turned over a new leaf, started his own business, and even got a job. For a long time, there were no more complaints filed against him. However, in 2016, a disturbing incident occurred. On August 31, 2016, 30-year-old Carla Brown and her 32-year-old boyfriend, Charlie David Carver, went missing after they were last seen visiting Todd's house to remove brush from one of his properties. Investigations led to a horrific discovery on November 3, 2016, when Kala was found chained to a wall inside a metal storage container on Todd's property. Further investigations uncovered the body of Charlie, which had multiple gunshot wounds. Kala reported to detectives that Todd had shot Charlie and kept her captive, regularly assaulting her brutally and threatening her not to try to escape. Todd was arrested and taken in for questioning. During the interrogation, he confessed to being the one responsible for a shooting that occurred at Superbike Motorsports 13 years earlier. On November 5, 2016, Todd was brought in for questioning and recounted the events of November 6, 2003, in a matter-of-fact way, without showing any signs of fear or guilt. According to Todd, on November 6, 2003, he bought a Suzuki GSX-R 750 from Superbike Motorsports, but soon realized he couldn't ride it due to his lack of experience. He decided to exchange the bike for a more beginner-friendly model. However, this exchange didn't happen on the same day. Todd told the detectives that his friends Scott and Brian teased him about his inability to ride the bike. After the bike theft, which occurred 14 days after the purchase, Todd filed a police report, but the bike was never recovered. Adding to his frustration, the police officer handling the case made fun of him, and neither the police nor the shop contacted him about the stolen bike or the $1,000 insurance deposit he had lost. Todd began attending college at Greenville Tech, but his interest in bikes never waned. He found himself returning to Superbike Motorsports, where he had previously shopped. However, his interactions with two employees, Scott and Chris, turned negative. According to Todd, they would mock and laugh at him whenever he visited the shop. One day, Todd decided to take revenge on they men. He waited until the shop was empty, except for Scott, Chris, Beverly, and himself. Then, he shot and killed the 4 people he had encountered. Todd later claimed that Beverly was not his intended target, but rather an innocent bystander who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. The victims' families finally found some closure and justice after 13 years, thanks to Todd's confession. In addition to the killings at Superbike Motorsports, Todd confessed to murdering Johnny, Joe, and Megan Lee Coxey, and Charlie David Carver, all of whom died from gunshot wounds. Despite being a serial killer, Todd did not face a trial. Instead, prosecutors negotiated a plea deal with him after consulting with the victims' families and a survivor. As part of the deal, the state offered Todd a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole, which he accepted just 7 months after his arrest. Todd was sentenced to 7 consecutive life sentences on May 23, 2017. In addition to these life sentences, he received 30 years for assault and 30 years for kidnapping. However, the fact that Todd pleaded guilty without a trial left many, including the victims' families, feeling that justice had not been fully served. The case also outraged the general public, who felt that the long wait for justice was unfair. Seventh Circuit Solicitor Barry Barnett expressed the frustration felt by many, stating that families should not have to wait years for justice. However, for Melissa, the wife of victim Scott Ponder, the sentencing brought a sense of relief and closure. She and other family members of the victims came together to hold a vigil in memory of their loved ones. After 13 years of pain and suffering, the victims' families finally had the answers they had been seeking about what had happened to their loved ones. In an interview, Melissa expressed her skepticism about Todd's motive for the murders, stating that she did not believe that her husband would have behaved in a way that would have provoked Todd. She recalled the kindness and good humor of Scott and another victim, Brian, and found it hard to believe that Todd's claims about their behavior were true. While Melissa was grateful that justice had been served, she felt that Todd's lack of remorse and casual demeanor during the investigation and court proceedings were disturbing. Many members of the public felt that Todd's crimes were so heinous that he deserved the death penalty. Todd's actions were heinous, and his lack of remorse is shocking. During the interrogation, he He spoke about the murders in a casual, matter-of-fact way, as if recalling a past memory. This was truly despicable. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Leslie Palacio. On the morning of the 29th, the family of Rosalia Palacio, a mother of 5 daughters, became concerned. Her eldest daughter, Kayla, noticed that Leslie's bed had been made, her belongings were missing, and it was clear that she had not spent the night at home. At first, one of the sisters joked that Leslie must have had a great time at the club and had probably slept over at Eric's house. However, everyone quickly became worried because Leslie had never done anything like this before. As they ate breakfast, Kayla kept checking her phone, expecting Leslie to text at any moment. But as time passed, there was still no news from Leslie. By noon, her mother Rosalia's anxiety grew. She decided to go to Eric's house to find out where her daughter Leslie was. When she arrived, she saw Eric's mother and sister moving furniture and other items out of the house. While this may have been a normal activity, the situation and Mrs. Ibra's tears made Rosalia feel uneasy. Something was wrong. When Rosalia asked about Leslie's whereabouts and why Eric's phone was not working, Eric's mother and sister insisted that they did not know Leslie had stayed with Eric the night before. Rosalia pressed them, asking if Leslie had stayed over, as her daughter had sent a text message saying she was going to Eric's house. When Eric's family denied this, Leslie's family began to realize that something was really wrong. Leslie's sister began searching for her by calling local hospitals and looking up accident reports from the past 24 hours online. However, she could not find any information about Leslie. The sister also tried to contact Eric, but his phone seemed to be turned off or had run out of battery, as it went straight to voicemail without ringing. Left with no other choice, Rosalia's mother decided to contact the police. On August 30th, the police officially listed Leslie as a missing person, marking the beginning of a long and intense battle for justice. Leslie Palacio was born on May 5, 1998, in Las Vegas, Nevada, USA. She lived a short but full life, filled with love and care for her family. Leslie was known to be friendly and outgoing, bringing joy to those around her. She appreciated everyone she met and was appreciated in return. Leslie aspired to pursue a career in medicine. After graduating from high school, she enrolled in Las Vegas College of Medicine in 2020 to become a phlebotomist. She worked part-time as a lab technician, combining theoretical knowledge with practical skills. As a student, Leslie showed exceptional talent. Her academic performance was impressive and she grasped new concepts easily, always striving to expand her knowledge. This motivation prompted her to take up a part-time job as a lab assistant. Her colleagues consider her not only a reliable and professional lab technician, but also a kind and compassionate person. Leslie's responsibilities include conducting a variety of analyses and tests, but for her, this job is more than just a job requirement. She sees her purpose as making the testing process as comfortable as possible for her patients. Her caring and patient nature creates an atmosphere of trust that puts even the most anxious patients at ease. Leslie's enthusiasm and energy are evident in everything she does. By all accounts, she had the potential to become a sought-after expert in the field of medical laboratory diagnostics. However, one big turning point changed everything. Leslie has been caring for others since she was a child. The second of 5 daughters, she often took on the role of mother when her mother, Rosalia Palacio, was exhausted from cleaning hotels. One evening, after Rosalia had cleaned more than 15 hotel rooms, Leslie gently told her to rest while she prepared dinner. Leslie found cooking enjoyable and took it upon herself to make sure her family was well fed. She continued to prioritize her family's health, even when she was away. She would call home to check in to see if everyone had eaten, showing that family was her top priority. Her energy and ideas inspired her sisters, and she easily became a role model for them. During the pandemic, Leslie found a way to stay active by hosting workouts in her backyard. She taught her mother various exercises and danced daily with her sister in front of the mirror to music. Leslie's creativity also extended to experimenting with hair color and image, which inspired a business plan with her sister to open a fashion boutique. Together, they designed and sewed dresses at home in their own unique styles. When the pandemic forced Rosalia out of work, Leslie suggested that her mother start a small cleaning company and offered to help with the cleaning in her spare time. "We'll be fine, Mom, you'll see," Leslie reassured Rosalia. The family brainstormed a name for the company, settling on Palacio Cleaning Services. The family business had landed its first contract, but everything changed on August 29, 2020. Leslie had just finished her lab assistant program and the company received a large order. Feeling relieved, she decided to take a break and enjoy a night of dancing and fun. This was especially welcome as Las Vegas slowly began to return to normal after the pandemic restrictions were lifted. Leslie's friends didn't want to hang out with her, even though things were slowly returning to normal after a period of fear and anxiety due to the pandemic. People still felt uncomfortable being in crowded, enclosed spaces. Leslie didn't give up and posted on Instagram about wanting to go out for the evening. She was surprised to see Eric Rangel Ibra texting her. Their parents had attended the same church for 14 years, so Leslie and Eric had known each other since they were kids, but had never really interacted. Leslie knew about Eric's interests, and although he would text her and show interest, she only responded out of politeness. However, on this special day, Leslie made an exception to her usual routine and accepted Eric's invitation to spend time together. She wanted to add a little excitement to her usual life with a fun night out. After a long day of anticipation and no friends to join her, Leslie decided that sharing a fun night out with Eric was better than staying home. She wanted to have an exciting adventure, but had no idea that a series of terrible events were waiting for her. Although she tried to reassure herself that there was no reason to worry. Anyway, Leslie agreed with her sister that she would send her sister regular messages, telling her exactly where she was. She also told Kayla in great detail where she was going, with whom, and where she could go. After a while, the sister received a strange text message. "Can you believe Eric is completely sober tonight? We're at a party, but it looks like I'm going to have to party alone." The sisters then exchanged joking text messages about other topics. Eric and Leslie's first destination was the Longhorn Hotel Casino. Surveillance footage later reviewed by police showed the couple arriving in Eric's white Ford F-250 at 12:31 a.m. on August 29th. They entered the casino and left shortly thereafter at 1:56 a.m. Leslie continued to communicate with her sister, updating her on their activities. At 4:40 a.m., Leslie sent her sister another strange text message. "I need to talk to you about something bad." Kayla asked what happened and, according to her, a text box popped up as if Leslie had started to reply, but there was no reply. That text message was Leslie's last. On the morning of the 29th, Leslie still had not returned home. As time passed, though Leslie's worries grew. Their initial certainty that Leslie had spent the night at Eric's house was replaced by confusion. The family decided to go to Eric's house, where they discovered a puzzling scene. Mrs. Ibra and her daughter were moving things out, pretending that they had just learned that Leslie and Eric had spent the night together. The Leslies arrived just in time. If they had arrived a few hours later, the investigation would have been significantly delayed due to the Ibra's suspicious actions. The police discovered blood stains in the house and a messy bedroom, suggesting that Eric's mother and sister had spent the day packing things, including furniture, instead of cleaning up evidence of the crime. This suggests that the family was planning a long-term escape, possibly to reunite with Eric and his father, Jose, in Mexico, where they had fled to avoid justice. However, when she met Leslie's family, Mrs. Ibra may have realized that their opportunity to leave had passed, leaving behind incriminating evidence. In a state of panic, Eric's mother and sister began to deny any knowledge of Leslie and Eric's evening together. It was this suspicious behavior that raised concerns that something terrible had happened. Fortunately, the Las Vegas Police Department acted immediately and sent out a payment investigation with the aim of tracking Leslie's movements since the previous night. However, it took some time to get the data. Leslie's family couldn't wait any longer, so they launched a campaign to spread information about Leslie's disappearance. People responded and started actively sharing information on social media. No one expected so many people to be interested. Eric's mother was especially surprised. On August 31st, Ms. Ibra went to the police station to file a missing person report for her husband and son. She informed the police that her son Eric had left home late on the evening of August 28 and returned the next morning, behaving strangely. She later saw him leave the house again, but he never returned. Police observed a strange situation when not only Leslie, but also Eric and his father were missing. This discovery prompted an investigation into the disappearance of all three. With the involvement of Las Vegas police, police began combing the neighborhood, looking for surveillance footage that might have captured important information. Fortunately, a breakthrough was made when surveillance cameras were discovered right across the street from Eric's house. Furthermore, police obtained payment data, which helped them piece together Leslie's movements in the early morning hours of the 29th. After reviewing this data, police learned that the couple had gone to the casino and then to a bar. Arriving around 2:15 a.m., Leslie's cell phone was left at the bar, and records showed that she left around 5:50 a.m. Shortly thereafter, at 6:05 a.m., Eric's car was seen pulling up in front of their house on neighborhood cameras. Eric helped Leslie out of the car and into the house, and it was clear that she was intoxicated. Then, at 7:25 a.m., Eric and his father Jose were seen carrying Leslie's body, wrapped in a sheet, out of the house and placing it in the trunk of their car. Eric then drove away, while Jose used a hose to clean the driveway. These actions suggested that Eric and Jose were not missing, but rather were trying to escape justice. After reviewing the footage, police obtained a search warrant for Eric's home. During the search, police found significant additional evidence that Leslie had not left the house voluntarily. Despite efforts to clean the house with cleaning products, the evidence remained. Rubber gloves and trash bags were discovered. And a key piece of evidence was found in Eric's room. Blood was found on the floor and on Eric's bed, indicating that an assault had clearly taken place. Even without DNA testing, police were certain that the blood belonged to Leslie. Leslie Palacio was no longer missing, and police focused their efforts on finding her body. Police are actively searching for suspects Eric and Jose. Leslie's family, despite their grief, is still trying to enlist members of the church community to help find their daughter's body. As volunteers search, flyers and posters with Leslie's photo and images of Eric and Jose appear on social media and in newspapers. Leslie's family asked for the public's help in locating the two men involved in Leslie's death, as stated in the flyer. The first major break in the investigation came when a license plate reader detected Eric's car just 6 miles from his home around 10 a.m. on August 29th. He was on his way home just 4 hours after Leslie's murder. This new information led police to conclude that Eric's potential hiding spot was within a 4-hour drive of his home, possibly near the Nevada-Arizona border or the Charleston Peak area, a vast area of land. Police desperately needed more information to pinpoint a specific location. Fortunately, a gas station 40 miles north of Las Vegas captured footage of Eric's car leaving the freeway heading toward Valley of Fire National Park. The car returned 20 minutes later with mud on its tires. The discovery focused the search within a 20-mile radius of the gas station. Mud on the tires indicated that Eric had driven off the road at some point. Police searched the area, with volunteers combing hundreds of acres. On September 9th, during a second search effort, Leslie Palacios' body was discovered hidden near a bush. News of the 22-year-old's body being found near the Valley of Fire, 11 days after she went missing, quickly spread to news outlets. A reporter provided additional details about the prime suspect, 25-year-old Eric Ranglibara. The extreme temperatures of the Valley of Fire, where Leslie's body was found, caused the body to decompose quickly, and forensic experts were unable to determine an exact cause of death. Locals were horrified and scared by Leslie's death. Some were afraid to go out because they constantly thought of the criminals involved in the murder. The day after Leslie's body was discovered, on September 10th, a large group of friends, relatives, neighbors, and people in the area gathered to remember Leslie. They placed candles from the night vigil outside Leslie's home and expressed their desire for the person responsible for her death to be held accountable. However, the pursuit of justice was not over. A significant breakthrough occurred when Eric's car was discovered in Moreno Valley, California. Police then contacted Eric's cousin, who revealed that he had driven Jose and Eric to San Pedro, where they were believed to have planned to cross the border into Mexico. Due to jurisdictional issues, the Las Vegas Police Department sought assistance from the FBI to further investigate the case. The investigation stalled until January 19, 2021, when Eric's father, Jose, turned himself in at the border. This development brought significant relief, as one of the fugitives was finally apprehended. Jose was quickly extradited to Clark County, where he faced charges of destroying evidence and being an accessory to murder. During questioning, Jose attempted to minimize his involvement in the crime, telling a story about his son's trip to Mexico on the morning of August 29th. However, police, shown surveillance video footage, dismissed his false claims. Footage clearly showed him helping carry Leslie's body out of the house and washing the driveway. Confronted with the evidence, Jose changed his story. He said he was working in the garage when Eric carried Leslie's body, wrapped in a sheet, into the garage. According to Jose, he panicked and helped his son put the body in the truck, assuming that Leslie had died of an illegal drug overdose. Court records show that Jose initially told police that Eric claimed Leslie died of an illegal drug overdose. Jose also said that Eric expressed a desire to end his life, blaming himself for Leslie's death, and that Jose's father thought it best to take his son to Mexico. When asked about Eric's current location, Jose explained that they had entered Mexico and boarded a bus, but the bus was stopped and searched by Mexican police. This caused them to become frightened and separate. As a result, Jose claimed that he wanted to help with the investigation but did not know where his son was. On June 18, 2021, Jose Ibarra pleaded guilty to tampering with evidence and being an accessory to murder. Despite the seriousness of his crimes, he was sentenced to only 2 years in the Clark County Detention Center. This lenient sentence shocked and outraged Leslie's family and the community. Jose Ibarra attended the trial online, while Leslie's family and friends attended in person. They asked the judge to impose a harsher sentence, arguing that 2 years was not enough for someone who helped dispose of the body and hide the perpetrator. Jose Ibarra apologized to Leslie's family, saying that his love for his son had clouded his judgment. He expressed remorse for his actions, but Leslie's family did not accept his apology. They were still not satisfied, as Eric's whereabouts were still unknown and he continued to live freely in Mexico. Jose was released from prison on April 28, 2022, after serving 8 months and 15 days. This development outraged Leslie's family, who felt that justice had not been served. Their lawyer, Ophelia Markarian, expressed her frustration, saying it was unfair that the prime suspect was still at large while a person involved in the cover-up of the murder was freed after a short sentence. Leslie's case highlights significant flaws in the justice system, raising concerns about the fairness of how serious crimes are handled. The Leslie family is committed to fighting to change Nevada law to ensure that those involved in the murder face prison terms longer than the current 2 years. They are determined to find the perpetrators, prosecute them, and punish them appropriately in the United States. Ophelia Markarian is using media interviews to reach out to anyone with information about Eric's whereabouts in Mexico, calling for justice for the Leslie family, even if it is only a small part. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sidney Luff. Sidney Irene Luff was born on August 21, 1993, in Broken Bow, Nebraska. She grew up in Arcadia with her parents, George and Susie Luff. In 2000, when she was in 2nd grade, her family moved to Norfolk. Her mother, Susie, worked as a special education teacher, and her father, George, was a school principal. Sidney was an active child and enjoyed a happy childhood filled with a love of nature. She loved fishing, an activity her father often took her to do. During her school years, she participated in basketball and golf, and showed outstanding potential in both sports. However, she developed scoliosis, which affected the curvature of her spine and forced her to give up many of her favorite hobbies and sports. In 2011, after finishing high school, Sidney began working at a Menards store that focused on home improvement products. The Luff family was very attached, and when Sidney needed to move from Norfolk to Lincoln for her job, they all made an effort to stay in touch nearly every day and often gathered for dinner. Although Sidney lived on her own, she frequently returned to her parents' house. Recently, however, she had been dealing with depression and felt that her medications were not helping, but rather worsening her condition. Susie, concerned for her daughter, recommended a new doctor who prescribed different medications for her. During phone calls with her mom, Sidney expressed that she was starting to feel normal again, sounding quite optimistic. She was trying to make positive changes in her life and was searching for a new job. Working in a store wasn't her ultimate goal. She felt there was more out there for her. However, she was uncertain about her career path and what she truly wanted, which contributed to her feelings of depression. In November 2017, Sidney's mental health worsened, leading her to start taking antidepressants and occasionally smoke marijuana. Although her family and friends were very supportive, but she was looking for more than just companionship. She wanted love. Being young and modern, Sidney was interested in women, so she often searched for dates on social media. She used Tinder, an app that helps people connect for dating, to find friends and romantic interests. During that month, she matched with a girl named Audrey, who responded to her message. They began chatting and discovered they shared many interests, including gambling, hiking, and enjoying good food. After exchanging about 100 messages, Sidney and Audrey decided to meet in person on November 14. Sidney traveled to Audrey's house in Wilbur, and their first meeting was a success, leaving Sidney very happy. They enjoyed each other's company and agreed to meet again at Audrey's house on November 15. After finishing her shift at the store, Sidney went home to get ready. She cleaned up, styled her hair, and did her makeup before heading out. She took a selfie and posted it on Tinder with the caption, "Ready for date." Shortly after posting, she received a message from Audrey, who was waiting for her in the car. The following day, Sidney failed to arrive at work. Her family, who had noticed her recent happiness due to a new friend, became worried. When her co-workers reported her absence, they were surprised, as this behavior was uncharacteristic of their responsible daughter. Susie mentioned that Sidney had been struggling with anxiety and severe depression. Just days before she went missing, Sidney had spoken with her family about her worsening mental health, and they had recommended that she see a doctor to resume her antidepressant medication. That was the last time her family saw her. Sidney's parents visited her apartment and were shocked to find that Sidney had left her beloved cat, Mimsy, without food or water. This was very unusual for Sydney, as they knew how much she cared for her cat and never left it alone for long periods. Worried for her well-being, they reported Sydney missing to the police. The apartment was locked, and when the police conducted a welfare check, they found nothing unusual. However, the family insisted that something was wrong, and the police took their concerns seriously. On November 16, 2017, a 5 feet 7 inches blonde named Sydney was reported missing after not showing up for her shift at the Menards store located at 27th Street and Cornhusker Highway. She had a spinal condition that affected her walking, making her easily recognizable. When she went missing, she was wearing a white Columbia jacket and a cream-colored shirt. Her parents told the police that earlier that week, on Wednesday morning, Sydney had shared on Snapchat that she had gone on a date with a woman she met online the previous Tuesday night and planned to see her again that Wednesday evening. Sydney's car was found in northeast Lincoln, and the police are interviewing people and searching for any clues about her or her location. Her family has been handing out flyers suggesting she may have been abducted 40 miles southwest of Lincoln, where her cell phone last connected. The flyers also mentioned that there has been no activity in her bank account and that her phone was turned off the night she went missing. The flyers included a description of Sydney and highlighted her notable features, such as several tattoos, one on her arm that says, "Everything will be great someday," yin yang symbol beneath her elbow, and the word "believe" on her wrist. Anyone who has information about Sydney's location is encouraged to contact the police by phone. A massive search for Sydney was launched. Billboards were placed on freeways with her picture. A manhunt was also broadcast on television news. Sydney's mother, Susie, continued to assert that something had happened to her daughter after that date. To support her this thing, she shared a screenshot of a Snapchat post from Sydney that included her picture and the caption, "Ready for date." Sydney's friends also confirmed that she was going on a date with a woman named Audrey, whom she had met through Tinder. During the investigation, police examined Sydney's phone records and surveillance footage from her workplace. They quickly identified a person of interest. The last time Sydney's phone was used, it connected to a cell tower in the Wilbur neighborhood, likely close to Audrey's home. However, the police did not know who Audrey was. They started looking for a woman named Audrey, the last individual to see Sydney alive, but they faced challenges in locating her because no one knew her real name. Sydney's friend Brooklyn stepped in to help the police by searching for Audrey on Tinder. After downloading the app, she located Audrey and they exchanged phone numbers. This led the police to discover that Audrey's real name was 26-year-old Bailey Boswell. They also found out that Bailey lived near the cell tower where Sydney's phone was last connected. Additionally, it was revealed that Bailey shared her apartment with her partner, 52-year-old Aubrey Trail. Bailey and Aubrey are two individuals with contrasting backgrounds. Bailey Boswell was raised in a typical family in Lyons, Iowa. As a child, she was sociable and performed well academically, also finding success in basketball and running. However, after the death of her father, her life took a different turn. Following her high school graduation, Bailey fell into a troubling lifestyle that involved alcohol and drugs. It was during this time that she met Aubrey on a dating website. Aubrey Trail had a problematic history, facing several fraud charges, including writing bad checks and theft. He established a cult where he referred to himself as Vampire Daddy and paid women $200 a week to adhere to his strange rules. When Sydney disappeared, Aubrey and Bailey were court-ordered to pay over $40,000 due to their fraud cases, and they had multiple misdemeanors. Despite this, the couple was able to evade the authorities. On November 19, 2017, after a warrant was issued, police conducted a search of Bailey in Aubrey's home. During the search, they found that some walls had been scrubbed with bleach. A neighbor confirmed this, stating they had noticed a strong smell of bleach 2 days earlier. After that, the police made more efforts to find the suspects. While evading capture, Bailey and Aubrey posted videos on Facebook denying any involvement in Sydney's disappearance and expressing their hope for her safe return. Bailey mentioned that she had gone on 2 dates with Sydney but had dropped her off at a friend's house, after which she never heard from Sydney again. Bailey added that she just wanted Sydney's family to know that she was really sorry, but she had nothing to do with it. She hoped that Sydney would be found very soon, as Sydney was a lovely, amazing girl. After several days, the police tracked down Bailey Boswell and Aubrey Trail at a hotel in Branson, Missouri. They were arrested weeks after Sydney was reported missing. Through a detailed analysis of phone records and Bailey's location history, investigators found Sydney's remains, which had been dismembered into 14 pieces. 13 of these body parts were discovered in black plastic garbage bags in ditches in Clay County, with some of her part, such as her heart, missing. The situation was horrific. In total, 16 crime scenes were connected to Sydney's remains or her personal belongings, including her car keys, driver's license, and phone case, which were found along the highway. These locations were consistent with the suspects' movements, Bailey and Aubrey. Forensic experts performed autopsies on the 13 body parts that were found. They found abrasions on Sydney's wrists, a bump on her head, torn earlobes, and various bruises, contusions on her back. These injuries suggested that Sydney had struggled to defend herself. The tragic finding devastated not only Sydney's family and friends but also the entire community of Nebraska. On December 11, 2017, the Luft family held a private funeral for Sydney at her lifelong Lutheran church. Bailey and Aubrey faced charges of first-degree murder, improper disposal of human remains, and conspiracy to commit a felony. Bailey pleaded not guilty to all charges, while Aubrey pleaded not guilty to felony murder and conspiracy but admitted guilt regarding the improper disposal of human remains. Aubrey's testimonies were inconsistent. Each time he spoke, he appeared increasingly confused, altering his statements and introducing new elements and characters into the story. After his arrest, Aubrey spoke to the police about the cult that he and Bailey belonged to. He discussed witchcraft and claimed that he was a vampire capable of flying. Aubrey presented himself as the cult leader and insisted that there were witches in the group who needed to kill another woman to gain powers. During one of Aubrey's early court hearings, he confessed to killing Sydney but insisted it was an accident. Aubrey explained that he paid Sydney $5,000 to fulfill a fantasy with 2 other women. Sydney agreed to this, but she tragically died during the encounter when he accidentally strangled her with a cord. Aubrey admitted to dismembering the body Sydney as part of a ritual tied to his religious beliefs. He said he needed to drain her blood to free her soul for the gods in a sacred location and arranged her body parts to aid in her reincarnation. However, this account was proven to be false. Surveillance footage from November 14 captured Bailey and Aubrey checking into a hotel in Lincoln, close to Sydney's residence. The following day, November 15, they went to a home improvement store, where they were seen purchasing a disturbing selection of tools, a hacksaw, bleach, a folding saw, a utility knife, and bags intended for Sydney's remains. On November 15 at 12:01 p.m., a surveillance camera recorded Sydney and Aubrey crossing paths at the Menard store during business hours. At that moment, Sydney did not know who Aubrey was or how their lives would become intertwined in a tragic way. On June 11, 2018, the first court hearing took place regarding the murder and improper burial of Sydney's remains. The court ordered separate trials for the defendants, Bailey and Aubrey, although the charges against them were essentially the same. The trials were held in Lexington because the attorneys argued that Bailey and Aubrey would not receive a fair trial in Wilbur due to the extensive media coverage of the case. The prosecution argued that Sydney was murdered through strangulation in a premeditated attack. Aubrey and Bailey were identified as the leaders of a group that recruited young women into intimate activities. To find these women, Bailey used Tinder. During the trial, the jury heard from 3 other women who had previously been in relationships with Aubrey and Bailey, and they shared that they also met these men on Tinder. All of these women had been involved with Bailey and had engaged in intimate activities with both Bailey and Aubrey. One woman testified that she traveled with Aubrey and was given a weekly allowance of $200. She claimed he invited her to join his cult, which he referred to as involving witches. To join, he told her she would need to torture and kill someone. She also mentioned that Bailey was called the Witch Queen. Another woman added that Bailey often talked about breaking her fingers and expressed a desire to dismember bodies. All 3 women emphasized that both Bailey and Aubrey actively participated in these discussions about torture and criminal acts. It is surprising that in today's world, some people still believe in the terrifying concept of exorcism and try to persuade others of its validity. The prosecution reviewed the investigation and the evidence gathered to piece together what happened on the tragic evening of November 15, 2017. Sydney was preparing for a date with a woman she had recently met through Tinder. Bailey picked Sydney up from her apartment, and they started driving in Bailey's car. Eventually, they arrived at Bailey's house, where Sydney was drawn into the apartment. As soon as she entered, Bailey and Aubrey attacked her and strangled her with an extension cord on the living room floor. Bailey and Aubrey then cleaned the apartment thoroughly, an action the prosecution claimed was planned in advance. They subsequently dismembered Sydney and disposed of her remains in Clay County. The next day, on November 16, the court heard from their landlord, Jennifer Cull. She testified that when she drove into the garage, she noticed a strong smell of chlorine, which became more intense when she entered the house. The medical examiner concluded that Sydney's death was a homicide caused by asphyxiation. Toxicology reports revealed that Sydney had antidepressants in her system. The court discovered that, in addition to the missing parts, Sydney's upper left arm, specifically the section above the elbow and below the shoulder, was also unaccounted for. Prosecutors have recommended the death penalty for the 2 suspects. They have also said they will review the case if the verdict is deemed unfair. Meanwhile, Aubrey again denied any involvement in occult activities and only admitted to improperly burying the remains. During his trial, he exclaimed that Bailey was not involved in Sydney's death, shouting, "Bailey is innocent, damn you all." Then, he attempted to end his life by slashing his throat 3 times with a razor blade. However, he survived and was placed in custody until he fully recovered. Aubrey did not attend court for several weeks after that. The next time he appeared was during the defense phase, specifically when he was scheduled to testify. When he entered the courtroom, he smirked and told the judge, "He will be good." It's uncommon for defendants to testify in their own trials, as defense attorneys often advise against it. This is because testifying can lead to complications during cross-examination. Some defendants may reveal too much information, struggle to answer questions clearly, or become confrontational with attorneys, which can negatively influence jurors. However, in Aubrey's case, his situation was different since he had many interactions with the police following his arrest. Aubrey had initially shared his account of incident with the police, but during the trial, he wanted to change his story. He chose to skip most of the trial and only attended the final hearing, where his noticeable scars were evident. When he testified in his defense, Aubrey shocked his attorneys by admitting that he had previously lied to both the authorities and his legal team regarding the death of Sydney. In his testimony, he confessed that he met Sydney in March 2017 and paid her to take part in his illegal activities because she was in need of money. He claimed they lost contact, but in November 2017, he reached out to Sydney again. She needed money, and Aubrey explained that this was the reason he was at Menards that day. On November 15th, Aubrey offered to pay Sydney $55,000 to she join his antiques gang. Later that night, Aubrey, Bailey, and Sydney became intimate, but unfortunately, Sydney accidentally choked to death due to an extension cord used during their activities. Aubrey stated that he didn't know if Sydney had a seizure or something. But that was when she stopped breathing. In court, he clarified that there was no ritual involved in dismembering Sydney's body and that claims about witches, vampires, and blood-sucking were false. Aubrey admitted that he had only dismembered Sydney because he couldn't fit her body in the car. Aubrey stated that he panicked and discarded Sydney's body in a field in Clay County at dawn on November 16th. When questioned about why he didn't seek help if Sydney's death was accidental, he claimed that no one would believe him. Aubrey confessed to disposing of Sydney's body but insisted that her death was accidental, occurring while they were playing with an extension cord. During Bailey's trial, she did not admit to any wrongdoing. In fact, her lawyers argued that she was also a victim of Aubrey. Her attorney told the court that when she met Aubrey, she was a vulnerable young woman, living alone and working as a waitress in Princeton, Missouri. The defense claimed that Bailey was not involved in Sydney's death or the handling of her remains. But this turned out to be untrue. Bailey's cell phone, which she used to access her Tinder account, was located near where Sydney's body parts were discovered. Through a thorough examination of Bailey's phone and location data, police were able to locate all of Sydney's remains. The court also found out that Bailey was the one who reached out to Sydney and set up a meeting. Bailey drove to Sydney's to pick her up on the evening of November 15th. The prosecution informed the court that Bailey found pleasure in discussing cruelty and enjoyed conversations about torture with Aubrey. Evidence presented during the trial indicated that a crime had been planned. On the day of Sydney's murder, Aubrey and Bailey were together at a store where they purchased tools such as a hacksaw, scissors, and a box cutter from Home Depot. Around noon that day, Bailey sent Sydney a text asking how her day was going. Phone records and surveillance footage confirmed that Bailey was in the Menards parking lot with Aubrey when she sent this message on Tinder. Despite working at Menards, but it seems that Sydney did not realize Bailey was there. A few hours later, Bailey sent Sydney a message on Tinder, said that her was at her apartment and would pick Sydney up soon. However, phone records reveal that instead of going on a date, they went to the apartment where Bailey and Aubrey lived. Bailey's attorney, Todd Lancaster, argued that the evidence indicated Bailey had bought bleach in garbage bags for the purpose of disposing of Sydney's body. This could result in charges of aiding and abetting the improper disposal of human remains. On November 8, 2021, Bailey Boswell was sentenced to life in prison. The Love family has been searching for justice for 3 years, grieving the loss of their beloved daughter, Sydney. They hoped for a judgment that would bring them some peace. On July 11, 2019, a jury took less than 3 hours to find Aubrey Trail guilty of planning a murder and improperly disposing of human remains. The 3 judges described his actions as cold and calculated. In the second part of the trial, which determined his punishment, the county prosecutors fulfilled their commitment and secured the death penalty for Aubrey Trail. Consequently, he was executed by lethal injection on June 9, 2021. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Rita Polite. On December 4, 1998, Michael Polite was at home in the small town of Hopewell, Missouri, United States. At the time, his mother, Rita, was working at a local bar. While she was working her shift, Michael was home alone. Feeling bored, he decided to ride his bike to the nearest store, a supermarket where he often met his friends. When he got there, he ran into his 15-year-old friend, Josh Sansu. Michael invited Josh over and Josh agreed, and Josh spent the night at Michael's house. They passed the time playing chess and video games while they waited. When Michael's mother came home from work, He saw the headlights flashing on the sunroof and realized she was home. After Rita got home, she told the children to go to bed. Michael then woke up near dawn. In his room, he was lying in bed and noticed a strange smoke coming from the crack in the door. Josh, who was sleeping on the floor near Michael's bed, suddenly woke up and looked at him in fear. Michael started calling for his mother, but there was no response. Tensions escalated, and the children began to panic. When they left Michael's room to go to their mother's room, they witnessed a horrifying scene. Josh and Michael saw Rita's legs covered in blood. Their mother's upper body was on fire. Rita was engulfed in flames up to her waist. Without hesitation, Michael ran to get water to put out the fire, calling out to her in the hope that she would answer, but it was too late. Meanwhile, Josh ran to a neighbor's house for help because they did not have a cell phone. By 6:30 a.m., emergency services arrived and firefighters began to put out the fire. After extinguishing the fire, Michael called his sister, Crystal, to share the heartbreaking news. When police arrived at the scene, they found a young man sitting on his bed, in a state of shock. He was unable to stand up and struggled to speak clearly. The horrific sight and smell of burning flesh haunted him forever. Police quickly began an investigation. It was clear that the victim had suffered a traumatic brain injury. She had been struck in the head with a blunt object before being set on fire. The fire chief examined both the body and the crime scene. He quickly determined that gasoline or fuel had been used to start the fire. Forensic experts thoroughly examined the scene but found no murder weapon. Police quickly suspected the son of killing his mother. Rita's death was motivated by cruelty and hatred towards her. Rita was only 40 years old at the time. In addition to Michael, she had two adult daughters, Crystal and Melanie, both in their early 20s. Rita's family lived in Hopewell, Missouri, a town where residents felt safe enough to leave their homes and cars unattended. It seemed like a peaceful haven, untouched by the violence of the outside world. Sadly, even in such places, terrible crimes can still happen. The town had a friendly atmosphere and the crime rate was so low that most locals often left their doors open at night. Michael's mother, Rita, left the door open without considering the potential danger, which may explain why there was no forced entry. The police's attention was now focused on Rita's son, Michael. Michael's parents, Edward and Rita, met when they were young and eventually married. Their first children were twins named Crystal and Melanie. The girls had vivid memories of their father's cruelty. Although Rita loved Edward very much, he often cheated on her and eventually became abusive, both emotionally and physically. Unable to bear this treatment any longer, Rita decided to get the police involved. The children often witnessed their father's violent outbursts, which later led to behavioral problems, especially in Michael. About a year before the massacre, the family dynamics worsened significantly. During this time, Michael witnessed Edward physically attack Rita. He knocked her to the ground with several blows and began to strangle her. Michael and his sisters were terrified for their mother's life. Fortunately, the children managed to distract Edward, allowing Rita to escape from his grip. Following this incident, the family faced many challenges. In the summer of 1998, after over 20 years of marriage, Rita filed for divorce. Edward sought joint custody of their children, but the kids did not want to live with him. Rita chose not to escalate the situation. When filing for divorce, she cited her husband's infidelity but did not mention the years of abuse she endured. As a result, the court awarded shared custody, forcing the children to visit their father, whom they despised. Michael and Josh were taken to the sheriff's office. Although the teens were clearly not ready to talk, the police began an immediate investigation. On the way to the police station, the patrol car driver noticed Michael making strange comments and showing little emotion. Although the body had not been identified, Michael insisted that it was his mother, since there was no one else in the house. The police, ignoring the possibility that Michael might be in shock and not fully comprehending what he was saying, became increasingly suspicious of his involvement in the incident. At the police station, Michael underwent a voice stress test, which is also known as voice stress analysis. After the test, the officers informed him that he had failed, but this could be attributed to the trauma he experienced after witnessing his mother's death. Furthermore, voice stress tests are controversial and their results are often considered unreliable, usually not accepted as evidence in court. The police also took Michael's shoes, and specially trained dogs detected traces of flammable substances on them, suggesting they were used to ignite Rita's body after the murder. Michael seemed to be attempting to hide his actions. Michael and Josh both claimed they had no idea what had happened. They were questioned without a lawyer present. According to the teenagers, they had been in Michael's room for some time, sleeping, and had not heard anything that had happened. Michael claimed that he had been in bed and had only come out when he smelled smoke. However, the police did not believe their testimony and the questioning became increasingly tense. Both boys remained in custody. Josh's mother went to the police station to support him as much as she could, while Michael's father chose not to support him and did not appear. On the second day, Josh made a statement on video camera in the presence of his mother and several police at once. He explained that he was not sure what had happened, but that he had woken up in the middle of the night just before the fire and found his friend Michael missing. He also admitted that he was fed up with the situation. The police took this as a contradiction to Michael's statement, which meant that Michael was lying. Josh's statement essentially confirmed the police's suspicions of Michael's involvement in his mother's murder. On December 7, 1998, Michael was arrested for the murder of his mother, shocking both him and everyone who knew him. Michael believed that it was a misunderstanding and was confident that he would be proven innocent and released. He maintained his innocence, but this did not convince the police. Michael insisted that he would never harm his mother, whom he loved dearly. Although they had had some recent conflicts, he hoped to gain support from his uncle and aunt, who lived nearby. His uncle, a politician, along with his sisters, sided with him, believing that he could not have harmed his mother. They believed that the investigation should focus on their father Edward. However, Edward was cleared of the crime because he had an alibi. Many people noticed problems in the relationship between Michael and his mother. The family struggled after the divorce. Financial difficulties affected both mother and children, and Michael, a schoolboy, faced challenges during this difficult transition. The police became suspicious because of Michael's behavior, which was hardly exemplary. In 7th grade, he began skipping school frequently. Teachers were concerned that he might not advance to the next grade due to his behavioral problems. About 10 months before the tragic events, Michael's behavior became significantly worse, and witnesses reported that he had threatened Rita. This led to Michael being taken to a psychiatric clinic. However, doctors found no underlying problems and attributed his behavior to puberty and the stress of his parents' divorce. Michael later admitted that threatening his mother was the biggest mistake of his life. Unfortunately, he could no longer apologize or take back his words. Many troubled teens act in similar ways, but not all of them go astray. Michael was not a criminal. He did not associate with bad influences or get into trouble that would make him a potential suspect. Although he denied any wrongdoing, the police were still fully convinced that he was guilty. Years passed as Michael waited for his Supreme Court hearing. During this time, he was in prison and was deemed extremely dangerous, so he was not eligible for bail. Just before the trial started, the prosecutor offered Michael a plea deal for manslaughter. If he accepted, he could face a maximum of 15 years in prison, but he turned it down. Michael maintained his innocence, stating he should not be punished for a crime committed by someone else. He believed the only person capable of harming his mother so brutally was his father, Edward, but no one paid attention to his claims. In January 2002, Michael, who had just turned 17, appeared in court. The prosecutor presented evidence gathered during the investigation, including shoes that had traces of flammable substances used to burn the body. Tests confirmed that gasoline was the substance used. The prosecution argued that the young man had a tendency towards arson. Multiple witnesses reported seeing him play with fire and intentionally destroying objects for entertainment. A friend of the defendant stated that a few hours before Rita returned from work, they had used gasoline to ignite some trash on the railroad tracks. Upon inspecting the crime scene, police found a canister with a small amount of flammable liquid left inside. The defendant's lawyer explained that although gasoline had splashed on Michael's shoes while they were playing with fire, this did not prove he was responsible for the fire in the house. The defendant did not kill his mother or set fire to her body. From the prosecutor, the jury heard about Michael's behavioral issues and possible mental health concerns. However, these were not confirmed during assessments. Before his mother, Rita, died, the young man's threats to her were considered key evidence that he was involved in the murder. Michael's initial belief that he would not go to prison began to wane. The prosecution argued that Michael attempted to end his life about a month after the murder, citing guilt for harming a loved one. A fellow inmate claimed to have heard Michael confess, but he was never brought to the stand to testify. Michael's defense maintained his innocence, but as he down and regained his composure, the jury began to suspect that he was hiding something. A key piece of evidence for the prosecution was a video of Josh's testimony from 3 years ago. Interestingly, Josh himself was not invited to take part in the case proceedings. From the start, Michael's defense seemed uncertain. It appeared they either lacked important information about their client or didn't believe he was innocent. The defense focused on the absence of direct evidence from the prosecution, which was actually true. No murder weapon or significant evidence was discovered. Additionally, there were no bloodstains or other traces on the Michael's clothing that suggested an attack had occurred. There were also no injuries that indicated he had struggled with the victim. The prosecution's hearings for the case lasted 3 days, after which the jury deliberated on the verdict. Initially, they struggled to reach a decision because the case was highly controversial. Eventually, they agreed that Michael was guilty of second-degree murder. Since he refused to cooperate with the prosecution, he received the maximum sentence of life imprisonment. Michael was stunned by the verdict. He accused the court of wrongful conviction and viewed himself as a victim, but he was sent to prison in Missouri regardless. No one paid attention to his claims anymore. This high-profile case drew the interest of several human rights activists who believed in Michael's innocence. However, over time, their interest in the case waned. The state correctional system is known for its extreme cruelty. From the moment he was imprisoned, Michael encountered the harsh realities of local prisons, which are among the most dangerous in the United States. On his very first day, he had a fight with his cellmate, Rome, and was sexually assaulted by prison staff. He realized that to survive in this environment, he had to adapt quickly, otherwise, he might not make it to his appeal hearing. Desperate to live freely again, he was determined to navigate this difficult phase of his life. He maintained that his conviction was due to a mistake. Despite feeling out of place in prison, Michael chose to alter his behavior by becoming more aggressive and getting multiple tattoos, as this was viewed positively by other inmates. This was his way of protecting himself. He repeatedly reached out to his father for help, but Edward did not support him. After 10 years of imprisonment, Michael's situation began to improve. During this time, he contacted the human rights organization Innocence, which advocates for the rights of those wrongfully convicted. The young man's case quickly drew the interest of several lawyers who thoroughly reviewed the case materials. They identified clear flaws in the investigation and the prosecutor's office. Human rights activists believed that the Michael's inconsistent statements made after his mother's death were a result of his fragile mental state and the trauma he had endured. Furthermore, it was evident that he was still a minor at that time. Given that his mother's skull was severely damaged, it was unlikely that a 14-year-old boy had the physical capability to cause such an injury to an adult. It was also suspicious that Michael's friend Josh didn't hear any sounds of a fight, suggesting that it likely never happened. Rita lost consciousness after just one blow from someone much larger and older than a 14-year-old boy. Furthermore, the fire chief's belief that the body was burned with gasoline was questionable. By the time emergency services arrived, the fire had already been put out, and any fuel had been consumed. The prosecutor's case relied solely on the dog's reactions, which indicated the presence of something that could start a fire. However, it's clear that the dogs couldn't accurately identify what they detected. The defense attorneys sought to challenge the key piece of evidence against the teenager: traces of gasoline found on his shoes. They argued that the testing method used to examine the soles was based on chemical reagents, which they believed was not reliable enough. They claimed this method could misidentify traces of gasoline as coming from certain polymers used in shoe production. Eventually, even the state crime lab supported this argument, noting that solvents and adhesives used in Michael's sneakers had chemical compositions very similar to gasoline. However, this information was not commonly known in the 1990s. Additionally, there was a video recording of Josh's statements. He had multiple conversations with police officers both before and after his friend's conviction. He mentioned that when he was 15, he endured lengthy interrogations by police, which were very tiring. Josh clarified that waking up in the middle of the night did not necessarily mean that Michael was harming Rita at that time. It was possible that his friend simply went to the bathroom. Ultimately, Josh expressed uncertainty about whether he could have seen an empty bed in the dark, suggesting that Michael might have been lying underneath it. Josh initially maintained Michael's innocence. However, the police created a misleading story using conversations taken out of context. Recordings from the interrogation revealed that Josh believed Michael was guilty. Josh later recanted his initial statement, revealing that police had threatened him into a plea deal to avoid being incarcerated with Michael. As a result, Josh did not testify at trial. Instead, the prosecution presented a video and audio recording of his testimony that showed potential involvement, without bringing Josh to trial. Michael's attorneys argued that this was because Josh could have contradicted key evidence that the prosecution relied on. Had the defense attorney had the opportunity to speak to Josh, the outcome may have been different. Following the incident, the media focused on securing Michael's release from prison by gathering evidence that disproved the prosecution's allegations. Many people close to Rita believed that Michael's father, Edward, was the real killer. Edward had a strong motive for the crime. After their divorce, the court ordered him to pay a significant amount of alimony to his ex-wife, which severely affected his finances. Many people attested to Edward's poor character and the way he treated his wife. During the divorce proceedings, he openly threatened Rita, saying that she would not live long enough to receive alimony. However, when Edward Polite was questioned by police after the murder, he gave an alibi. He had been more than 100 kilometers away from his home during the time of the crime, and witnesses corroborated his testimony. Therefore, any suspicion against Edward was dismissed. From the beginning, Michael insisted that his father was the only one capable of planning Rita's murder, suspecting that Edward was working with others to commit the crime. This theory was further supported by his legal team. Attention turned to Edward's brother Johnny. Interviews were conducted with neighbors and Johnny's wife, who testified that he returned home around 6 a.m. on the day of the murder and then disappeared overnight without giving a clear reason for his absence. Neighbors also reported seeing his pickup truck near the Rita's home late that night. During the investigation, police discovered a crowbar among Johnny's belongings, which appeared to be the instrument used to inflict the fatal injuries on Rita. The crowbar was sent for examination and was tentatively identified as the murder weapon. Despite this evidence, the prosecution maintained that Michael was guilty. His attorneys filed an appeal. They brought all their supporting evidence to the appeal. Unfortunately, Missouri's judicial system is notoriously strict, making it difficult to overturn a verdict or reopen the case. From the start, the court imposed obstacles on Michael's legal team, leading to the dismissal of their appeal. As the legal battle continued, it seemed that Michael's lawyers were in trouble. Then, in 2021, something important happened. Missouri passed a new law that gave a second chance to juvenile offenders convicted of serious crimes. Michael and his legal team quickly seized this opportunity, which played a key role in their case. On April 22, 2022, Michael's two sisters, Melanie and Crystal, brought the entire family to the rehabilitation center to welcome their younger brother, who had been paroled after 23 years. At age 38, as he walked out of prison, Michael looked up at the sky and expressed gratitude to his mother, recognizing her unwavering support for keeping him hopeful during his difficult years in prison. After his release, Michael wanted to ride a bike, a favorite hobby from his life before prison. He moved in with his sister because he had nowhere else to go and hoped to forget the decades he spent surrounded by criminals. To help with this, he started removing the tattoos that reminded him of his time in prison. Eventually, he found work as a carpenter and reconnected with his old friend Josh, who sincerely apologized for his part in what happened. Michael understood and assured Josh that he held no grudge against him. Josh expressed regret for not sleeping on the sofa that night. He believed that if the attacker had come in through the front door and seen Josh on the sofa, things might have turned out differently. Despite the new law allowing for conditional early release, the prosecutor could still initiate a new trial at any time for those who had been released. However, Michael recognized that there were significant gaps in the police evidence against him. The case against him relied solely on circumstantial evidence, which could be challenged. These accusations had a serious impact on his reputation, but he remained hopeful that the court would reconsider the case, especially since the real killer was still at large. The lawyers proceeded with caution to avoid harming Michael or provoking Missouri's justice system. Eventually, the local sheriff acknowledged the need to reopen the investigation into Michael's mother's murder. This renewed focus required police to re-examine a large amount of evidence that had been neglected for over 20 years. One key piece of evidence, the Rita's car, was also available for analysis. The prosecutor's office collaborated with the defense team, marking a significant turning point for Michael. He had been imprisoned for a murder he did not commit since he was just 14 years old. After spending 23 years behind bars, which represented most of his life, he longed to return to a normal life and felt he was finally on that path. However, he still needed to clear his name completely. Additionally, Michael was determined to find his mother's real killer, convinced that his father was responsible for setting him up. This betrayal had devastated his life while his father continued to live freely. The investigation into the crime was still active, and despite the obstacles presented by the local justice system, many law enforcement officials, including the prosecutor, supported Michael. With their backing, he felt confident that the true criminal would eventually be brought to justice. The investigation is ongoing, and there are indications of progress. However, even if justice is served, it won't bring back the lost decades for Michael. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Catherine Gowing. Catherine Gowing was a 37-year-old veterinarian from Ireland who had a passion for traveling and nature. One of her favorite places was the outskirts of Wales in the UK. Mold, a small town in North Wales with a population of around 10,000, is known for its restaurants, pubs, markets, and shops. It was in this town that Catherine lived. Born in 1975 into a large farming family, she was one of the youngest daughters. Her father dedicated his life to agriculture while her mother worked as a teacher. Throughout the long summer holidays, the family would work together on the farm, cultivating a strong work ethic in their children. As a result, the children eagerly participated in farming activities from an early age. Catherine always dreamed of becoming a veterinarian, so she loved working with the animals on her father's farm. The beautiful countryside captivated her, deepening her affection for rural life. Moving to Mold aligned perfectly with her desires. Catherine dedicated herself to her studies, graduating from St. Brandon's High School and then attending community college in Barrie. Not only was Catherine a dedicated student, but she also excelled academically, particularly in the natural sciences, where she ranked third in the country based on her exam results. This achievement led many to believe she had a promising future ahead. After completing her secondary education, she pursued her dream of studying veterinary medicine at the University of Budapest in Hungary. At university, Catherine formed a close group of friends, including Jane Doyle, an older friend from Ireland. They shared a deep understanding. Together, they spent their free time studying, relaxing, and attending social events, all while pursuing their shared passion for veterinary medicine. After graduating as a vet, Jane found a job at a veterinary clinic in Mold, North Wales, and moved there. She then recommended Catherine for a vacancy when it became available. From the moment of interview, the clinic staff were attracted to Catherine. With her cheerful, positive attitude and high level of expertise, she demonstrated a strong passion for working with animals, winning the trust of everyone. Catherine was an outstanding psychologist, which allowed her to connect easily with the owners of her animal patients. These qualities quickly made her one of the most popular veterinarians in the city. The girls fell in love with their new environment, but since they didn't own any property, the veterinary clinic provided their accommodation, which they weren't particularly fond of. To reduce expenses, they decided to rent a house together in a nearby village called New Brighton, just a 10-minute drive from work. The year 2012 marked the peak of Catherine's and Jane's lives. At that time, Catherine was 37 years old and had been working at the veterinary clinic for a year and a half, building a strong reputation. She was attractive and charming, and her soft Irish accent attracted many men. However, she wasn't interested in starting a family yet and remained focused on her work with animals. Even when she agreed to go on dates, those relationships usually didn't last long. In October, Jane planned a weekend trip to visit her family and asked Catherine to cover her shifts at work for a few days. Jane expressed that she not only wanted to visit Ireland but was also considering the possibility of moving back permanently to care for her elderly parents. Understanding this need, Catherine agreed to help. On October 12, 2012, the day Jane was set to leave, Catherine finished her work shift at 8 p.m. as usual. She then went to a nearby store to do some shopping. CCTV footage captured her at the store entrance at 8:06 p.m. At that time, Catherine was wearing blue jeans and a brown zip-up jacket, and she carried a bright brown bag across her body. She spent about 30 minutes shopping in the store. After she was seen on camera in different departments, she was recorded again as she left, carrying a plastic bag and a pizza box. This was the last sighting of her. Since the woman lived alone, her disappearance went unnoticed at first. The following Sunday, October 14th, Catherine was scheduled to meet a work colleague for lunch, but she never contacted him. She didn't show up and ignored his attempts to reach her. This worried her friend, who had known Catherine for a long time and found her sudden silence unusual. Initially, a coworker assumed that Catherine was just sick and resting at home. The situation became urgent when Jane returned from Ireland on Sunday evening and discovered that Catherine was not home. Her car was also missing, and strangely the front door was unlocked. Jane searched the house for any signs of her friend's location but found nothing. Catherine wasn't answering her calls, and the house was filled with a strong smell of cleaning products, which struck Jane as odd. She also noticed that Catherine's personal items, like her car keys, handbag, wallet, and mobile phone, were missing. Jane assumed that Catherine had gone home for the weekend as planned. Exhausted, Jane went to bed despite not having slept well and knowing she needed to wake up early for her shift. She felt confident that Catherine would reach out to her in the morning, and perhaps they would see each other at the veterinary clinic where Jane worked. Jane woke up and looked around her house again, but there was still no sign of her friend. Her calls and messages to Catherine went unanswered. She then went to work, hoping to find her there, but Catherine didn't show up at the clinic. Instead of being angry about her absence, the clinic management was worried. They knew she hadn't been in touch since Friday when she left work. During that time, a few people received a brief text message from her, which surprised everyone because it didn't sound like her usual style. These messages were never shared publicly. Concerned for her safety, the employees decided to contact the police. Jane spent the entire day trying to reach Catherine, but her calls went unanswered. After finishing work, she went directly to the police station to report Catherine's disappearance. She shared details about Catherine's recent life, which helped the police eliminate her as a suspect. Jane also mentioned that Catherine's car was missing, which could potentially provide a clue to the investigation. The police quickly began their investigation by interviewing Catherine's friends and acquaintances. Everyone commented on her sense of responsibility, never changing her plans without informing someone. This raised concerns that something terrible might have happened to her. Police obtained surveillance camera footage that showed Catherine's movements from the veterinary clinic to a nearby store. After she left the parking lot, her trail went cold, making it impossible to track her any further. Catherine's parents, who live in Ireland, were promptly informed of the situation. They mentioned that their daughter had not visited them over the weekend and that they hadn't seen or heard from her in several days. Catherine's sister-in-law flew in from Wales to assist the police in the investigation and the search for Catherine. Immediately, they turned to the public through the media to gather any information about her. Unfortunately, no useful information was received. No information was received until October 16th. During this time, police believed that Catherine might have been a victim of a crime. While no blood stains were found, but police did discover fresh male DNA on her bed linen during an inspection of the victim's house. They also found a piece of cloth tied around the bedpost. It appeared that someone had come to see her while her friend was away, tied her up, and then had an intimate encounter with her. Forensic experts discovered evidence at the scene and sent it to the lab for analysis. On the evening of October 14th, while Jane was trying to contact Catherine, she received a call from Clive Sharp, Catherine's then 40-year-old boyfriend. They had argued shortly before Catherine went missing. And now Clive wanted to attract Jane's attention and buy her a present. However, Jane did not answer his phone. Before this incident, Catherine and Clive had been dating for several months. Clive, who worked as a sales consultant, lived about 150 kilometers away from Jane and Catherine's home. Despite the distance, he frequently visited them. Catherine met Clive through a dating app, and Jane was already acquainted with him. Clive often spent time at their house, but Catherine felt uncomfortable around him and preferred to leave whenever he arrived. This information reached the police, prompting them to investigate Clive's background more closely. The day after Catherine was reported missing, the police arrested Clive Sharp on suspicion of her murder. At that point, however, the investigation lacked both Catherine's body and any concrete evidence against him. Charges could not be brought against the man, so police couldn't detain him for long without evidence. However, They did obtain permission to search his car and collected material for DNA analysis, which was sent for examination. At the same time, police gathered information on the main suspect in the veterinarian's disappearance. At the same time, the police gathered information about Clive. They checked his police record. Clive has a criminal record. Despite his charming appearance, he spent 14 years in prison. His crimes were mainly sexual assault. He was first convicted of such acts at the age of 16, when he sent obscene letters and was aggressive towards a number of girls. At 17, he was sentenced to 3 years in prison for rape after attacking a 15-year-old girl and threatening her with a piece of glass. After his release, it seems that Clive tried to turn his life around. He went into hiding for a while, got married, and had a daughter with his wife, Gillian. For many years, he remained off the radar of police and was not involved in any reported crimes. However, his attempts to build a normal family life did not last long. Gillian died of drug addiction. This may have had a huge impact on him. In 1995, at 26, Clive was imprisoned again for sexually assaulting his friend's wife, receiving a 5-year sentence. Just a few months after his release, he was incarcerated once more, this time for a more serious crime. He attacked a woman, bound her, raped her, and threatened her with a knife, resulting in an 8-year sentence. Remarkably, he was granted parole after serving just 5 years. In 2003, he was released and remarried. By 2011, he had ended a previous relationship and was now in a tense relationship with his girlfriend, Catherine Gowing, who had gone missing. The police found this suspicious coincidence. As a result, Clive Sharp became the prime suspect and was arrested. While in prison, he attended a specialist program designed to help sex offenders control their urges. In this program, he publicly detailed his disturbing behavior, including tying up women and threatening them. After committing the violence, he envisions 2 outcomes. He will lose interest and release the victim, or he will fantasize about killing them, envisioning scenarios in which he strangles or drowns them. The program was discontinued in 2017 after convincing evidence that it did not help solve the problem of sex offenders. While in prison, Clive claimed he had an alibi for the time when Catherine disappeared, saying he was visiting relatives. Interestingly, his daughter and her stepfather supported his claim, stating they saw him that weekend and he appeared calm. However, this did not rule out the possibility that Clive could have harmed Catherine. He could have attacked her, disposed of her body, and then gone to visit his relatives. The police examined this information for inconsistencies in Clive's story and increased their scrutiny. They soon discovered that Clive Sharp was lying. DNA test results from Catherine's bed showed a 100% match with samples taken from Clive. This indicated that he had sexual intercourse with Catherine. No one believed that the encounter was consensual. Catherine had disliked Clive and actively avoided any communication with him. The search for Catherine continued, but hopes of her safe return were slim, especially after Clive revealed he had violent fantasies. Just 2 days later, a couple walking near the abandoned Pin Flame Quarry, just a few miles from Catherine's home, discovered the burned-out car. They quickly called the police. Although the car was badly damaged, the police were quick to confirm that it belonged to Catherine. By this time, news of Catherine's murder had spread throughout the community. However, no body was found in the car, and no further evidence of what had happened had emerged. As a result, many had given up hope of finding Catherine alive. Meanwhile, Clive Sharp continued to deny any involvement in her disappearance. On October 19th, the prosecutor's office concluded that they had enough evidence to charge him with Catherine's murder. Even without a body, preparations began for a long and contentious trial, with the prosecution attempting to gather all available evidence. The investigation into Clive's guilt and the search for her body is ongoing near Catherine's home. where her burnt-out car was discovered. The search involves police, volunteers, helicopters, dogs and divers who have checked all the nearby waters. On January 7, 2013, Clive had not confessed to the murder. However, the search did not last long, as divers soon found human remains in a lake near a quarry, close to the location of the burned car. Dismembered body parts were found in the reservoir, approximately 3 kilometers away. All of the remains were sent to a laboratory for testing. Experts determined that the body parts belonged to Catherine. Unfortunately, as some body parts were missing, the cause of death could not be determined. After an extensive search of the reservoir, no further remains were found. The parts that were found were sent back to Ireland for Catherine's family. Catherine's funeral was held in County Offaly, Ireland, where her family received support. Clive Sharp's trial began on January 14, 2013. Unexpectedly, he confessed to his crimes at the outset of the trial, on the advice of his lawyer, which significantly accelerated the proceedings. However, this was not because he felt remorse, but because he had little choice, as the prosecution had overwhelming evidence against him, including DNA and the cloth used to bind the victim. While the prosecution presented a detailed account of the harrowing events, the Clive remained evasive and did not fully explain what transpired in the house. According to the prosecutor, on October 12, 2012, Clive broke into Catherine's home while she was alone. He monitored her until she went to bed, then entered the house and attacked her in the bedroom, restraining her to the bed. It is believed he covered her mouth to stop her screaming for help before raping her repeatedly and eventually strangling her. After the attack, Clive went to buy cleaning supplies. He was captured on surveillance cameras at the store where Catherine had been seen alive the previous day. He bought garbage bags, cleaning products, a can of gasoline, and a Halloween mask from a nearby construction store. He also acquired a hacksaw and some blades. Upon returning to Catherine's house, he began to dismember her body, packing the pieces into bags and loading them into his car. He then cleaned the crime scene meticulously, making it impossible for forensic scientists to determine where he had dismembered her. He disposed of the remains in the water and destroyed all her belongings, including her car, which he soaked with gasoline and set on fire. To cover up his actions, Clive sold his old car and bought a new one the very next day. He boasted about this new car to Jane while she was trying to learn what had happened to Catherine. The old car was located, and the police obtained a search warrant. During the search, they discovered fabric that matched the material used to restrain the Catherine, along with blood stains and Clive's DNA. Additionally, geolocation data from his mobile phone confirmed that Clive was near the lake and at the location where the burnt car was found right after the crime. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Clive refused to speak about the crime during the investigation. Another shocking detail emerged: the intended victim of Clive that night may have been another woman for whom he also had feelings. He tried to break into her house around 10 p.m. on the same night he attacked Catherine. Although they had been involved previously, she ended the relationship due to his rude behavior. When Clive tried to tie her up and harm her, she told him to stop and leave, which he complied with. Clive drove to Catherine's house to fulfill his disturbing desire. Around midnight, he parked nearby where he could see her house clearly. Recorded on CCTV, he waited until about an hour after she went to bed before taking action. After the attack, he returned to his car and spent an hour and a half reflecting on what he had done. He went back to Catherine's house around 3 a.m., knowing she was alone and using a key that Jane had given him, which eliminated any barriers. During the trial, Clive confessed but offered few new details. He kept his head down and avoided looking at the prosecution or Catherine's family. Ultimately, Clive Sharp was found guilty of murdering Catherine Gowing. The prosecution requested a minimum sentence of 42 years, but due to his guilty plea, this was reduced to 37 years. A monument to Catherine was later built in the Catholic Church in Buckley, funded by employees of the veterinary clinic where she worked. A year and a half after the crime, Catherine's friend Jane was still deeply affected following Catherine's death. Jane left her job at the veterinary clinic and moved to northwest England to start over. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Victoria Rickman. At 2:30 a.m. on Friday, September 13, 2013, Victoria Rickman, 30, called 911 from her home on Cliffland Road in DeKalb County, Georgia. She reported a violent incident involving her fiancé, William Carter. She told the operator that he had tried to rape her again, and despite her pleas for him to stop, he didn't, so she shot him multiple times. When the police arrived, they found Victoria at the door, holding a small dog. Inside the bedroom was a scene of chaos and violence. The lifeless, naked body of a man was on the bed, riddled with bullets, and blood was splattered throughout the room, with bullet holes marking the walls and ceiling. A .40 caliber pistol was found on the nightstand. The victim, 30 years old William Carter, was declared dead at the scene. Victoria, in a state of hysteria, required medical assistance. After examining the scene, the police initially concluded that it was a case of self-defense, as Victoria claimed William had attacked her, forcing her to shoot randomly in defense. She was taken to the police station to provide a statement. However, as the investigation progressed, new details came to light. Victoria Rickman's first marriage ended in a divorce, with both parties accusing each other of abuse. During the marriage, she had a son whom she adored. At the time of the divorce, he was 8 years old. Victoria's friends described her as a devoted mother and a kind person who was always willing to help others. A few years after the divorce, Victoria met William Carter through work colleagues. William was a successful businessman and is a divorced man. At that time, Victoria worked as a marketing consultant. They often encountered each other at work and soon began a passionate romance. They were inseparable, doing everything together and appearing to be the perfect couple. However, over time, the relationship developed issues similar to those Victoria had experienced in her first marriage. After they got engaged and moved in together, Victoria discovered that things were not as perfect as she had hoped. William became possessive, insulted her, and was physically abusive. She repeatedly forgave him and they continued living together. It was a vicious cycle of a toxic relationship that she couldn't escape. Victoria's friends advised her to leave William, they warning that things would end badly if she stayed. Victoria said she endured psychological, physical, and sexual abuse, and she felt she had no ability to change her situation. She continued to endure and forgive his behavior. However, just before the tragedy, she found the strength to leave Then he began to harass her relentlessly. According to Victoria, that night, he broke into her house and attacked her, escalating their conflicts to a peak. He threatened to rape her, and although she resisted, but she couldn't overpower him due to his physical strength. For the first time, Victoria feared for her life, convinced that the night would end in death. Either hers or his. So, she defended herself by grabbing a gun and shooting him multiple times. Victoria's best friend fully supported her and was sure that she was in grave danger that night, otherwise, she would not have used a weapon. The friend knew there were family issues but did not think it could all end like this. The detectives decided to speak with William's family to hear their version and get a more complete picture of the relationship between Victoria and William. William's parents, who had just learned of what happened to their son, immediately denied that it was self-defense. They gave a completely different story about Victoria. The parents said they had warned their son about the dangers of such a toxic relationship. They disliked Victoria from the start because of her unpleasant personality, and they saw her as a threat to be avoided. A few weeks before the tragedy, another disturbing incident occurred during an argument between William and Victoria. His parents noticed he was bleeding and injured. He explained that Victoria had hit him on the head with a hammer and bit his back. His parents were shocked because the blow was severe and could have been fatal. They dreaded to think what might have happened if she had had a gun. Then William and Victoria separated again, and his parents hope they won't come back. He didn't press charges against she because she threatened to accuse him of rape. William's family said they often argued and these conflicts often progressed into fights. Sometimes Victoria attacked William, and sometimes he attacked her. During their 3 years their relationship was tumultuous. Victoria and William frequently reported each other to the police for issues ranging from domestic disputes to assaults. Police reports confirmed this pattern. She threatened to obtain a restraining order against he, while he threatened to have her jailed for making false accusations. A few days before William died, he and Victoria met, but the meeting did not end well. They argued, and William called 911 to request police assistance to evict Victoria from his home. When the police arrived, Victoria claimed that William had hit her, but they saw that she had no injuries. The police discovered that she had sent text messages to his phone with false accusations, claiming he had kidnapped her and threatened her, whereas he was simply asking her to leave him alone. The police helped she pack her belongings and escorted her out of his house. William told her he never wanted to see her again. Although Victoria promised not to bother him anymore, she did not keep her word. A few days later, Victoria began texting William, asking to meet, but he ignored her. She then devised a new plan and contacted his ex-wife, repeatedly harassing his ex-wife. The ex-wife complained to William about her behavior. This upset he, and he sent she a message. He said she are too dangerous to be around, and told her never to contact him or his ex-wife again. The conflict reignited. During another argument, he threatened to report her to the police because she attacked him with a hammer. Victoria was furious because she realized that this could threaten her custody of her beloved son. William's family believed this was the motive for the crime. The relationship between William and Victoria became increasingly complicated and confusing. Although Victoria alleged that she was raped by William, an autopsy found no signs of violence or internal trauma, shows that sexual intercourse was consensual. On her body, there were only 2 small bruises, one on her arm and one on her leg. These bruises appeared old and not the result of a recent struggle, as they were already fading. Her new manicure was intact without any broken nails and showed no signs of a struggle since there were no skin particles under her nails. Furthermore, William did not have any scratches, which was unusual. When the police arrived at the house, Victoria's appearance raised suspicions. While the room was covered in blood, she appeared clean. With no blood on her pajamas or body, and her hair was wet as if she had just showered. The police doubted Victoria's story and suspected her of killing William. Forensic experts thoroughly investigated the scene of the tragedy and concluded that Victoria's testimony was inaccurate. Evidence indicated that William was shot while standing with his back to Victoria. It was believed he was next to the bed, facing the window, when he was hit 3 times. One of the shots caused blood to fill his lungs, leading to a cough. The high blood spatter on the wall next to the window suggested that he was standing when shot. After coughing, he likely fell onto the bed, and Victoria continued shooting him, she firing several more shots into his chest and head. There were no signs of a struggle in the house, everything was neatly in place. This also contradicts Victoria's testimony that a struggle occurred. Victoria was detained and brought to the police station for questioning. Upon hearing she was accused of murdering William, her expression changed drastically, surprised by the accusation. When the police tried to collect her phone as evidence for examination, she tried to snatch it back furiously. This behavior seemed strange to the investigators. It seemed that she was hiding something on the phone and feared it would be discovered. Investigators examined the correspondence between Victoria and William, as well as their phones, revealing that William deeply loved her. He sent heartfelt messages, calling her the love of his life, but expressed concern about her actions. He feared her false accusations might lead to his imprisonment. Subsequent messages from William show a marked change in tone. The investigation uncovered that Victoria had sent herself a threatening message from William's phone to incriminate him. Further evidence showed that Victoria had attacked William on at least 2 occasions, yet she called the police and claimed he attacked her. Victoria threatened to smear her neighbor Plunkett when he tried to evict her from the flat. Victoria Rickman was charged with first-degree murder and held without bail. She finally stood trial for the murder of William Carter in August 2017, after spending almost 4 years in jail. Once a vibrant and attractive woman, famous for her beautiful appearance, Victoria appeared completely different and almost unrecognizable in court. Several men testified about how skillfully she had manipulated them during flirtations, causing them to become infatuated with her and willing to do anything for her. Even some police officers admitted they were captivated by Victoria's beauty and flirtatious behavior when she responded to complaints of domestic violence, making them side with her. These officers later regretted their lack of impartiality. A prime example of Victoria's manipulation was her relationship with Deputy Sheriff Colby County Price. She reported threats from William to him. Upon seeing bruises on her body, he entrusted her with one of his personal pistols for self-defense. This same pistol was used in the shooting of William. Additionally, the deputy sheriff took Victoria to a shooting range and taught her how to use a gun, and she developed her shooting skills expertly. After William was murdered, Victoria first called Cuba Price and then, on his advice, she called 911. During the trial, Cuba Price admitted he was captivated by Victoria, despite being married at the time. He thought their relationship might evolve, but denied having an affair, stating they were just friends. By the trial, he no longer worked at the sheriff's office and was instead an instructor at the Air Force Base. He had been fired 5 days after William's death for not cooperating with the investigation, as he protected and defended Victoria. The charges alleged that Victoria used her charm to entice William to her home on that tragic night. Sadly, William could no longer share his side of the story, so the prosecutor presented it on his behalf. According to the prosecutor, Victoria called William that evening, inviting him over with the promise of intimacy, thereby luring him into a trap. Once he arrived, she allegedly took advantage of the situation and killed him in cold blood by shooting him 9 times. The prosecutor argued that shooting him 9 times was excessive. Her decisive actions suggested premeditation, leading the prosecutor to conclude that it was a planned murder. Additional evidence supported this conclusion. At the time of the murder, Victoria was living with another man, Andrew, in his house. That night, she asked Andrew to stay at his mother's house so she could be alone and get a good night's sleep. Trusting her, Andrew agreed and went to his mother's. Just half an hour after he left, Victoria contacted William, and he arrived at her house after midnight. It's unclear what she said to him on the phone, but it's presumed she invited him over. There were no signs of forced entry. Victoria herself opened the door for William. He did not break into her home and was unaware of her address until she gave it to him during the call. During the trial, the doctor who examined Victoria after the murder testified, and photos of Victoria were presented. The doctor stated that he found no injuries on her body, including any defensive wounds or fresh bruises. It appeared she had not been raped, as their relationship was consensual. Notably, a bruise on her hand, which she claimed was from a fight with he, was visible in a selfie taken the day before his murder, proving it was unrelated to self-defense. Photographs from the crime scene were also shown at the trial. William's naked body, with multiple gunshot wounds, was found lying face up on the bed. His clothes were on the floor next to the bed, his watch was neatly placed on the nightstand, and he held a gold chain in his left hand. It seemed he was disturbed while dressing, and when he tried to refasten his necklace, he was shot. An expert confirmed that William was shot from behind, indicating he posed no threat to Victoria. An autopsy revealed that William was shot 9 times. 4 times in the chest, 3 in the back, and twice in the head. He also had bruises on his chin and left hand, likely caused by a blunt object. Blood spatters were found on the wall, curtains, and pillows on the floor. The medical examiner suggested that William was facing the window when he was first shot in the back, fell onto the bed, and was then shot the remaining times. During the trial, questions were raised about the reloading of the pistol. The pistol can only hold 12 rounds, yet 9 spent cartridges were found at the scene, leaving 4 bullets in the pistol. This totals 13 bullets, leading the prosecution to conclude that Victoria had reloaded the pistol. If she reloaded, the act could not be deemed as self-defense, as reloading shows premeditation. At the trial, a neighbor named Plankett testified that Victoria had previously threatened him when he attempted to evict her from her apartment. She threatened to accuse him of rape, causing him to back down to avoid trouble. Victoria had filed multiple rape complaints against different men, but no criminal cases were initiated because there was no evidence beyond her claims. The prosecution found it suspicious that all the men around her were accused of rape. The lawyer argued that Victoria was a vulnerable and defenseless woman in life. She had suffered violence from both her first husband and William, her fiancé. On the night of the incident, William broke into her house, assaulted, and raped her, then threatened her life. To protect herself, she used a firearm provided by her friend, the deputy sheriff. The lawyer asserted that this was clearly a case of self-defense. The defense stated that William arrived at Victoria's house intoxicated and under medication. A doctor testified that 3 days before his death, William reported experiencing delirium and was prescribed antipsychotics to aid his sleep. The lawyer also suggested he might have used illegal drugs that night, causing his aggression. However, it remains unknown whether he was intoxicated or on drugs that night, as no toxicology test was conducted. Dr. Chris Lees Perry, the former Georgia chief medical examiner, testified for the defense, indicating that Victoria first shot William in the chest, not the back. During the trial, Victoria's 911 call was played, and the lawyer stressed that the emotions she expressed were genuine and couldn't be faked. She sounded truly desperate. Victoria's best friend testified for the defense, stating that she had seen bruises on Victoria before, which Victoria claimed were caused by William. However, the friend never witnessed any violent incidents and couldn't confirm the bruises were from William. She did recall overhearing William yelling at Victoria on the phone once. Seeing Victoria's distress during that call convinced her that Victoria was a victim of domestic violence and not capable of murder. She believed Victoria acted in self-defense. The defense also highlighted William's troubled past. He had struggled with substance abuse and had been arrested several times for property damage. After 10 years of marijuana use, he went to rehab. William's parents confirmed this thing, but they said that he had overcome his addiction, rebuilt his life, and started a business. They were proud of his recovery and believed that Victoria was his last obsession. They felt that whenever she called, he would rush to her without realizing the potential danger. The prosecution presented a dramatic video recorded on Victoria's mobile phone 4 months before William's death. In the video, she threatened to call the police and accused him of rape after he kicked her out. She acted aggressively, trying to enter the house, but he prevented her. She responded that he could not tell her what to do and that she had a gun and knew how to use it. Her behavior did not seem like that of a typical victim of violence. The conversation concluded as William expressing that Victoria was frightening him, saying he did not want to see her anymore, and then leaving. The prosecution believed something similar occurred on the night of the incident, but with a tragic ending. At the trial, the jury heard two different yet plausible stories. They now had to decide which side was more convincing, its self-defense or premeditated murder. The jury reached a verdict in less than an hour, finding Victoria Rickman guilty. She sat silently, devastated by the decision, and cried. She addressed the judge, saying that she believed the jury was wrong. "Thank you for explaining the facts of this case. I am a mother whose son was taken from me." She describes herself as a battered woman who endured years of abuse and suffered nightmares and post-traumatic stress disorder from trying to defend herself. Victoria continued to deny her guilt and showed no remorse for shooting William. As a result, the judge was not lenient and sentenced Victoria to life in prison without parole. Her lawyer was also shocked by the verdict and sentence, considering them unfair. He believed the evidence was circumstantial and unconvincing, and that she deserved the possibility of parole and a more lenient sentence. Victoria is appealing and hopes her case will be reviewed, but so far her requests have been denied. William's daughter is being raised by his mother, and Victoria's son is being raised by her ex-husband.